Have you ever felt that the world is talking too much, and that your own mind is talking even louder? We are living in a relentless cacophony of distraction, orchestrated by the phantom buzz of notifications, the infinite scroll of news feeds, and the invisible pressure to have an opinion on everything, to engage, to respond. This external noise seeps inward, merging with the echoes of our own anxieties about the future, our regrets about the past, and the endless inner dialogue of self-judgment. We are caught in a vortex of sound and thought that leaves us feeling exhausted, scattered, and profoundly disconnected from ourselves. In a culture that prizes extroversion and constant performance, silence is often profoundly misunderstood. It is mistaken for weakness, ignorance, or apathy. The one who speaks quickly and reacts sharply is seen as confident and intelligent, while the one who remains quiet is viewed with suspicion. This invisible pressure to fill every void, both in conversation and in our daily schedule, has turned our lives into a frantic race, depleting our inner energy and sowing the seeds of deep-seated anxiety. But what if this is a profound misunderstanding? What if silence is not an empty space to be filled, but a fertile space full of potential? What if stillness is not a sign of weakness, but the very source of an extraordinary inner strength? In the great wisdom traditions of the world, particularly in the insight of Buddhism, silence is revered not as a void, but as a sanctuary. It is the necessary condition for deep listening, the fertile ground in which understanding can grow, and the very doorway to an authentic and unshakable peace. This is not the silence of fear or resignation, but an intentional, majestits, and deeply healing silence. This is an invitation to join a journey of discovery, to explore the reasons why the wisest among us so often choose to say less, and to uncover why silence is the ultimate strength of a peaceful mind. We must begin by naming our adversary, not as an external enemy, but as the very environment we have built and now inhabit, a landscape so pervasive we barely notice its dominion. We live under a quiet tyranny, the tyranny of noise. This is not merely about the physical sounds of the city, the sirens, the construction, the traffic, though those certainly play their part. The noise we speak of is a far more insidious and complex architecture of distraction. It is composed of two forces, two currents that feed and amplify each other in a relentless feedback loop: the noise from without and the noise from within. Let us first examine the external world. The modern soundscape is a digital cacophony. Your phone, that sleek portal in your pocket, is the primary instrument. It vibrates with a phantom limb's insistence, even when silent. Each notification, a tiny, sharp pebble tossed into the still pool of your concentration. A like on a photo delivers a minuscule jolt of dopamine, a fleeting validation that leaves you wanting another. A news alert delivers a spike of cortisol, a low-grade alarm that keeps your nervous system perpetually on edge. This external noise is the unending scroll, an infinite river of information designed to have no end, pulling you along in its current, stealing minutes that turn into hours. It is the pressure of the social feed, a curated gallery where everyone else's life seems to be a seamless highlight reel. silently demanding that you, too, perform your happiness, broadcast your successes, and craft an acceptable digital version of yourself. It is the expectation of immediate availability, the idea that every email must be answered, every message seen, every call returned, blurring the sacred boundaries between work and rest, between public and private life, until all of life feels like one long, unending shift. This external noise operates on a profound promise that it will save you from the dreaded state of boredom. Yet, in its relentless mission to entertain and inform, it erodes our capacity for the very things that give life its depth, deep thought, sustained focus, and genuine connection. But this external clamor is only half of the equation. It is the catalyst, the spark that ignites the even more chaotic noise within. In Buddhist psychology, this internal turmoil is vividly named Citta Vinara, the monkey mind. Imagine a monkey, restless and agitated, leaping frantically from one branch to another, never still, never content. This is the nature of the untrained mind. This internal noise is the constant, chattering monologue that narrates our lives. It is the voice of the planner, perpetually rehearsing future conversations, composing tomorrow's to-do list, and playing out 1,000 hypothetical scenarios of what might go wrong. It is the voice of the historian, obsessively replaying yesterday's mistakes, rereading that awkward email, and nursing old grievances like prized possessions. It is the voice of the supreme judge, the inner critic who sits on a high throne, passing down endless verdicts on our worth, comparing our progress to others, and whispering that we are never quite good enough. And perhaps most powerfully, it is the voice of the storyteller, weaving grand narratives from scraps of evidence, convincing us that we know what others are thinking, that we understand their motives, that the world is a certain way, and that our role within it is fixed. This internal symphony of anxiety, regret, and judgment is utterly exhausting. It is a constant state of mental static that prevents us from ever truly hearing the subtle melody of the present moment. Herein lies the truly insidious nature of the tyranny. The two forms of noise are not separate. They are locked in a self-perpetuating cycle. A vicious resonance. The external noise triggers and validates the internal noise, and the internal noise seeks solace and distraction in the external world. Consider this: a feeling of loneliness or inadequacy bubbles up from within. This is the monkey mind whispering its familiar, painful story. What is our first impulse? We reach for the phone. We plunge into the external noise of social media, seeking a momentary distraction, a hit of connection to quiet the inner ache. An email from a demanding boss arrives, an external stimulus. Instantly, the internal critic awakens, questioning our competence, while the internal planner begins frantically rehearsing potential defensive replies. We are caught in a ricochette, a ping-pong match between the world's demands and our mind's reactions. The external noise is the wind that whips up the surface of the ocean. The internal noise is the restless, choppy water. The wind makes the waves bigger, and the churning water becomes even more susceptible to the slightest breeze. There is no peace, no stillness, only this constant, agitated motion. We are living in a state of perpetual reaction. Our inner world, a mirror reflecting the chaos of the outer world. The consequences of living this way are profound, chipping away at the very foundations of a meaningful life. On a cognitive level, our ability to concentrate is shattered. We trade the capacity for deep, focused work for the shallow skill of rapidly switching between tasks. Doing many things but none of them well, our thoughts become fragmented, our memory less reliable, because we rarely give any single piece of information our full, undivided attention. Emotionally, we are simmered in a broth of low-grade anxiety. We feel constantly overwhelmed, irritable, and spread too thin, a condition modern psychology calls cognitive overload. Spiritually, and perhaps most tragically, we suffer a deep sense of disconnection, disconnected from our own bodies, whose subtle signals of stress and fatigue are drowned out, disconnected from the people around us, because we are rarely truly present with them. Our minds already leaping to the next notification, the next thought, and most fundamentally, we are disconnected from ourselves, from that quiet, centered place within that is the source of our intuition, our creativity, and our deepest wisdom. Consider the story of Evelyn, the celebrated CEO of a cutting-edge tech firm in Silicon Valley. By all external measures, she was the epitome of success. Her life was a blur of product launches, board meetings, and keynote speeches. Her days were orchestrated by a symphony of alerts from her multiple devices, a constant stream of data and demands. She was lauded for her ability to multitask, to be everywhere at once. But inwardly, Evelyn felt a growing barrenness. The innovative spark that had once defined her had been replaced by a weary sense of just keeping up. Her mint, as she described it, felt like a web browser with 100 tabs open, all of them playing different videos at once. The constant noise had not made her more productive. It had made her fragile, anxious, and creatively bankrupt. In an act of desperation, she booked herself into a 10-day silent retreat, a concept that seemed utterly alien to her life. The first 3 days were torture. With the external noise finally switched off, her internal noise became a deafening roar. The monkey mind, deprived of its usual distractions, screamed and raged. All her anxieties, her insecurities, her meticulously suppressed fears came rushing to the surface. She was tempted to flee, to return to the familiar chaos. But she stayed, and slowly, painstakingly, something began to shift. The roar subsided into a murmur, and the murmur eventually gave way to moments of precious, unadulterated silence. In that silence, for the first time in years, she felt a sense of coming home to herself. Evelyn's story is our story. We are a culture drowning in noise, mistaking the frantic motion of the waves for the power of the ocean. We have built an existence that systematically separates us from the quiet space where clarity, creativity, and compassion are born. We have now mapped this territory of our own unrest. We have named the architecture of our prison this tyranny of noise both without and within. By seeing it clearly, by understanding its mechanics and its costs, we have taken the first crucial step. Now that we have identified the illness, we can begin to explore the cure. We must turn our attention away from the storm and begin to investigate the nature of its opposite, not as a mere absence of sound, but as a potent and healing presence. We must learn about the rich and varied spectrum of silence, having recognized the deafening chaos of our modern world. Our first instinct might be to seek silence as a simple refuge, a mere absence of sound, but to treat silence as a monolith, as a single, empty state, is to misunderstand its profound and varied nature. Silence is not a vacuum, it is a landscape, rich with different climates and terrains. To navigate it wisely, we must first learn to read the map. The quality of silence is determined entirely by the intention, or lack thereof, that we bring to it. It can be a barren desert or a fertile garden, a cold prison or a sacred sanctuary. In our exploration, we will find that there is a vast spectrum of silence, ranging from the deeply uncomfortable to the divinely liberating. At the most familiar end of this spectrum lies the silence. We all dread the awkward silence. You know the feeling well. It descends in a conversation like a sudden fog, thick and disorienting. The easy flow of words ceases, and a palpable tension enters the room. Your mind begins to race, scrambling for something, anything to say to fill the void. You might fidget, clear your throat, or stare intently at a meaningless spot on the wall. In these moments, silence feels like a social failure, a spotlight exposing a lack of connection. But what is the true source of this discomfort? It is not the silence itself, but what the silence reveals. It is a confrontation with our own inner restlessness. When the distraction of conversation disappears, we are left alone with the frantic energy of our own monkey mind. The silence holds up a mirror to our inner state, and we are often terrified by the agitated reflection we see. We use words as a shield, a performance, a way to project an image of who we want to be. The awkward silence is the moment the shield slips, leaving us feeling naked and exposed, both to ourselves and to the person across from us. It is an anxious silence, born from a fear of stillness, a fear of being truly seen without the comforting camouflage of speech. Moving from the personal to the interpersonal, we encounter a much colder, more deliberate form of silence, weaponized silence. This is the silence of the cold shoulder, the silent treatment. It is a profound misunderstanding to think of this as a lack of communication. On the contrary, it is an incredibly loud and aggressive act of communication. This silence is a tool of control, a passive-aggressive cudgel wielded to punish, to manipulate, and to assert dominance. It creates a chilling vacuum around its target, a psychological exile designed to induce guilt, anxiety, and confusion. To be on the receiving end of weaponized silence is to feel like a ghost, to have your very existence negated. You replay every recent interaction, desperately searching for the transgression that earned you this banishment. This silence is heavy with unspoken accusation and bristling with hostility. It is the ego in its most defensive and punishing form. It says, "You have wronged me, and you are not worthy of my words until you have paid your penance." It severs connection, builds walls, and sows mistrust. It is the polar opposite of the wise silence we seek to cultivate, for it is rooted in conflict and the desire to control rather than in acceptance and the desire to understand. But let us turn a corner now, moving from the shadows into the light. The spectrum shifts, and we discover a silence that heals and connects. Empathic silence. This is the silence of true listening, a conscious and generous act of holding space for another human being. It is not a passive waiting for your turn to speak, but an active, focused presence. Imagine a therapy session. A man, let's call him Leo, is struggling to speak about the loss of his father. The words catch in his throat, and the memories are a tangled knot of grief and love. He speaks in fragments, then falls silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, his shoulders slumped with the weight of it all. His therapist, a wise woman named Dr. Anya, does not rush in with comforting platitudes or probing questions. She does not say, "I know how you feel," or "It's important to talk about it." Instead, she simply remains present. She leans forward slightly, her expression soft and patient, her posture conveying a single, powerful message: "I am here. Take all the time you need. This space is yours." In that quiet, unwavering presence, Leo feels an immense sense of safety and permission. The pressure to perform, to explain, to make sense, dissolves. The empathic silence held by his therapist becomes a sacred container, a womb in which his tangled feelings can finally begin to unfold. After a long moment, a tear rolls down his cheek, and the real words, the true words, begin to flow. This is the power of a silence rooted in compassion. It is a gift we can offer to our partners, our children, our friends. It is the understanding that sometimes the most profound act of love is to simply be quiet and bear witness. Now we arrive at the furthest, most luminous end of the spectrum. This is the silence that is the very goal of our journey. The silence that leads to wisdom. In the Buddhist tradition, it is called Arya Tunhibhava, noble silence. Unlike empathic silence, which is directed outward toward another, noble silence is directed inward. It is the deliberate quieting of both external speech and, more importantly, internal chatter, for the express purpose of observing the nature of one's own mind. This is the silence of meditation. It is an act of courage, a willingness to sit down and face the full force of the monkey mind without the usual escape routes. When we first attempt it, as our CEO Evelyn discovered, the inner noise can seem to grow louder, more chaotic, as if protesting this newfound attention. But as we persist, something remarkable happens. By choosing not to engage with the thoughts, not to follow them down their endless rabbit holes, we begin to see them for what they are: fleeting, impersonal events. We are not our thoughts. We are the silent awareness, observing the thoughts. Noble silence is the laboratory in which we conduct the great experiment of self-discovery. In this quiet space, we witness the constant arising and passing away of sensations, feelings, and ideas. We see the mechanics of our own anger, our own craving, our own joy, without being swept away by them. It is not an empty, dead silence. It is a silence that is vibrant, alive, and filled with a silent, watching intelligence. It is the ultimate act of self-compassion, a commitment to stop fighting a war with our own mind and instead to sit down peacefully and understand its ways. Therefore, we see that silence is not a simple, singular thing. It is a dynamic spectrum of human experience. It can be the anxious silence of social fear, the hostile silence of interpersonal conflict, the healing silence of deep empathy, or the liberating silence of profound wisdom. Understanding this distinction is the first critical step. It allows us to see that cultivating silence is not about becoming withdrawn or uncommunicative. It is about making a conscious choice. It is about learning to move away from the silences that are born of fear and ego, and toward the silences that are born of love and understanding. We are not just trying to be quiet. We are trying to cultivate a specific quality of quietude. Now that we have mapped this terrain and identified our destination, this noble silence, we can begin to ask the practical question, why? What are the tangible benefits of embarking on this inner journey? The first and most immediate reward is the reclaiming of our most vital and finite resource, our own energy. As we venture into the world of intentional silence, we arrive at its first and most practical gate. Before we can speak of enlightenment or ego dissolution, we must address a more immediate concern, one that governs our every waking moment, the management of our personal energy. Think of your energy not just as physical stamina, but as a holistic resource, a combination of your mental focus, your emotional stability, and your spiritual vitality. It is a finite well from which you draw all day long. Every decision you make, every emotion you feel, every task you perform, takes a ladle of water from this well. Our modern, noise-filled existence has us ladling at a frantic pace, often leaving us feeling drained and depleted by day's end. In this context, the practice of silence emerges as the most powerful and direct method for conserving, cultivating, and redirecting this precious resource. It is the first, essential step in moving from a life of frantic expenditure to one of intentional investment. Let us first conduct an honest audit of the energetic cost of speech. We treat words as if they are free, but they are one of the most expensive commodities we possess. Every time we speak, we engage in a highly complex cognitive process. We must first formulate a thought, search our vast mental lexicon for the appropriate words, arrange them into coherent syntax, and then articulate them through a precise series of muscular contractions. Simultaneously, our brain is processing the non-verbal cues of our conversation partner, gauging their reaction, and already beginning to formulate our next response. This is demanding work. It is mental weightlifting. And this is just the cost of neutral, functional speech. When our words are charged with emotion, the price skyrockets. An angry outburst is the energetic equivalent of sprinting up a hill. It floods the body with adrenaline and cortisol, leaving us shaky and depleted afterward. An enthusiastic, gossipy conversation is a shower of mental sparks, enjoyable in the moment, but ultimately scattering our focus and draining our reserves. Complaining, perhaps the most common form of unnecessary speech, is a slow, steady leak in our energetic tank. A repetitive cycle of negativity that offers no solution but demands constant fuel. Beyond the mechanics of speech itself, we must confront the modern cultural affliction that is the burden of the opinion. We live in an age that does not simply allow for opinions, it demands them. The digital town square of social media operates on an economy of reactions, hot takes, and definitive statements. We feel a strange compulsion to have a viewpoint on everything. The latest political scandal, a new film, a celebrity's misstep, a conflict happening halfway around the world. To admit, I don't know enough to have an opinion, has become a kind of social heresy. This pressure forces us into a state of perpetual mental grazing. We consume headlines, read comment threads, and watch short video summaries, gathering just enough superficial information to construct a passable viewpoint. Then, we spend more energy defending this hastily built structure, engaging in circular debates, and feeling the emotional sting of disagreement. It is a colossal waste of our life force. We are pouring our finite cognitive and emotional resources into 1,000 shallow streams, leaving the deep river of our own life to run dry. The wise person understands this trap. They recognize that their energy is a sacred trust, too valuable to be squandered on the fleeting dramas of the world. They choose to withhold their opinion not because they are uninformed, but because they are disciplined. They are practicing a form of energetic triage, saving their power for what truly matters. This brings us to the crucial distinction between passive silence and active silence. Passive silence is empty. It is the silence of someone who has nothing to say or is too intimidated to speak. Active silence is full. It is the silence of someone who chooses not to speak. It is a conscious, deliberate act of conservation. Imagine your inner energy as a savings account. Every time you engage in idle gossip, you make a withdrawal. Every time you complain, you make a withdrawal. Every time you offer an unsolicited opinion or get drawn into a pointless argument, you make a significant withdrawal. Conversely, every time you feel the impulse to do these things and choose, instead, to remain silent, you are making a deposit. You are turning the outflow into an inflow. You are closing the leaks. This conserved energy does not simply vanish. It accumulates. It builds within you as a reservoir of quiet strength, a palpable sense of inner stillness and power. This is the energy you will need for the real work of life, to think a difficult problem through to its solution, to access a truly creative insight, to be fully and compassionately present for a loved one in their time of need, and to face your own challenges with resilience and grace instead of reactive fear. Silence, in this sense, is not deprivation. It is the most profound form of self-care. It is the act of plugging your own psychic energy drains. There is an old story that illustrates this perfectly. Two monks, Ananda and Kassapa, were on a long pilgrimage to a sacred mountain. Ananda was young, exuberant, and loved to talk. He chatted with every traveler they met, commented on every village they passed, and narrated the journey with a constant stream of observations. He believed his sociability was a form of kindness, a way of connecting with the world. Kassapa, an older and more seasoned monk, walked mostly in silence. He smiled at fellow travelers, observed the villages with a calm eye, and felt the journey in his bones. But he spoke very little. When they finally arrived at the foot of the sacred mountain after many weeks, Ananda was utterly exhausted. His body ached, but more profoundly. His mind felt scattered and frayed, like a garment torn into 1,000 threads by the endless interactions. He felt he had given a piece of himself to every person and every event along the way, and now had little left. Kassapa, while physically tired from the long walk, possessed a deep and tranquil vitality. His eyes were clear, his spirit was calm, and his mind was collected and whole. He had walked the same path as Ananda, but by choosing silence, he had walked it without losing himself to it. His energy, conserved and protected, was now available for the final, arduous climb up the sacred mountain. Ananda had spent his energy. Kassapa had invested his. This is the first great lesson of the silent path. To close the mouth is to open an inner fountain of power. It is to declare that your inner world is more important than the constant demand for outward expression. It is a revolutionary act in a world that tells you your value is measured by your visibility and your volume. By turning down the external output, we create the necessary conditions for a much more important process to begin. With this newly accumulated reservoir of energy, we are no longer desperate to broadcast our own thoughts and feelings. We finally have the inner resources, the quiet stability, to stop transmitting and begin. At long last, the sacred work of receiving, we are now ready to truly listen. Having passed through the first gate and learned to conserve our energy, we arrive at a profound realization. This newfound reservoir of power is not meant to be hoarded. It is capital to be invested in the cultivation of a forgotten art, a skill so fundamental yet so rarely practiced that it has become a kind of superpower. This is the art of deep listening. The wise person's silence is not a void. It is a state of profound and active receptivity. They speak less, not because they are disengaged from the world, but because they are far too busy listening to it with an attention so complete that it borders on reverence. They understand a secret that our noisy culture has forgotten. True understanding does not come from broadcasting our own certainty, but from the quiet humility of receiving another's reality. To grasp the depth of this art, we must first dissect the common act we mistake for it. For most of us, listening is not an act of understanding. It is a competitive sport. We engage in a process that is better described as combative hearing. While another person is speaking, we are not truly with them. Instead, we are deep within our own minds, furiously preparing our rebuttal. We are listening for the flaw in their argument, the crack in their logic we can exploit. We are searching their story for a hook upon which to hang our own, more interesting story, waiting impatiently for them to take a breath so we can interject with, That reminds me of the time we are filtering their words through the thick mesh of our own biases, beliefs, and experiences, hearing not what they are saying, but what their words mean in the context of our life. This is not listening. This is reloading. It is ego listening, a fundamentally self-centered activity where the other person is merely a prompt for our own performance. We are not seeking to connect with them. We are seeking to win, to impress, to correct, or to assert our own relevance. Deep listening, the practice of the wise, is an entirely different modality. It is a surrender, a setting aside of the self. It is a multi-channel experience that engages the whole of our being. We can think of it as listening through three distinct, simultaneous channels. The first, and most obvious, is listening with the ears. This is hearing the words themselves, but with a pristine clarity, free from our own mental commentary. It means receiving their sentences as they are, without immediately translating them into our own narrative. It is paying attention to their tone of voice, the rhythm of their speech, the pauses and hesitations that are often more meaningful than the words themselves. Is their voice tight with unspoken tension? Is it trembling with suppressed emotion? The words are just the lyrics. The tone is the music. The second channel is listening with the eyes. This is the art of reading the unspoken language of the body, which often tells a truer story than the mouth. A person might be telling you they are fine while their hands are clenched into tight fists. They might speak of a happy memory, while a flicker of profound sadness passes through their eyes. Are their shoulders hunched defensively? Is their body angled away, betraying a desire to flee? Is there a forced quality to their smile? The body does not know how to lie. It is the repository of our honest emotions. To listen with the eyes is to receive a stream of data that is pure and unfiltered by the conscious mind's desire to present a certain image. It is to notice the dissonance between the spoken and the felt, and to hold that dissonance with gentle curiosity rather than judgment. The third and most profound channel is listening with the heart. This moves beyond sound and sight into the realm of pure empathy. It is the ability to attune ourselves to the emotional frequency beneath the surface of the interaction. It is asking not, what are they saying, but what are they feeling? It is sensing the unspoken grief behind a story of anger, the deep-seated fear beneath a display of arrogance, the yearning for connection behind a veneer of cynicism. To listen with the heart requires the empathic silence we have previously discussed. It requires a quiet mind and an open heart, a willingness to feel a faint echo of another's emotional state within ourselves without becoming overwhelmed by it. This is the channel through which true connection happens. When someone feels that their underlying emotions are understood and accepted, they feel truly seen in a way that words alone can never achieve. The practice of listening in this holistic way does something miraculous for the speaker. It creates a sanctuary. When a person feels the expansive gift of our silent, non-judgmental attention, a profound sense of safety arises. The need for posturing and defensiveness dissolves. In this safe space, they are free to explore the meandering paths of their own thoughts and feelings without fear of being cut off or corrected. Very often, a person does not truly know what they think or feel until they have had the chance to articulate it to a receptive witness. The deep listener, in this sense, acts as a sort of midwife, helping the speaker give birth to their own clarity. Your silence becomes a statement of profound respect. It says, "I am willing to suspend my own reality for a moment to fully inhabit yours. You matter. What you are experiencing matters." This is one of the greatest gifts one human being can give another. This outward practice of deep listening has a powerful, reflexive effect. As we train ourselves to listen deeply to others, we inevitably learn to listen deeply to ourselves. By quieting the endless need to speak and react, we attune our inner ear to the subtler voices that are constantly speaking to us from within. We begin to hear the voice of the body, the persistent tension in the neck that signals our stress, the hollow feeling in the stomach that alerts us to our fear. We begin to hear the voice of our intuition, that quiet, non-linear knowing, the gut feeling that so often guides us more wisely than our rational mind. And ultimately, we may begin to hear the voice of our own innate wisdom, that compassionate, spacious awareness that is always present beneath the noisy chatter of the ego. We are filled with inner oracles, but we have been too loud to hear their counsel. There is a powerful story from the life of the Buddha that captures this truth perfectly. A great king, powerful and wealthy, but consumed by anxiety, came to see him. Without waiting for a greeting, the king launched into a frantic monologue, describing the endless problems of his kingdom, the threats from his enemies, the betrayals of his courtiers, the heavy weight of his responsibilities. He spoke for a long time, his voice filled with agitation, pacing back and forth in the quiet forest grove. The Buddha did not speak. He did not interrupt, offer advice, or propose a single solution. He simply sat, his presence a basin of immense, unwavering calm, and he listened with his ears, his eyes, and his heart. Eventually, the king's torrent of words slowed to a trickle, and then ceased. He stood panting in the vast, accepting silence that emanated from the Buddha. In that silence, for the first time, the king truly heard himself. He heard the shrillness of his own fear, the arrogance of his own complaints, the grasping nature of his own desires. The problem was not in his kingdom, it was in his mind. He looked at the Buddha, bowed his head, and said, "Thank you, Blessed One. You have helped me more than you can know. By allowing me to speak, I have found my own answer." The Buddha's listening was the teaching, the silence was the cure. This is the art we seek to cultivate. It is why the wise are so often silent. They have ceased the competitive sport of hearing and have embraced the sacred, creative act of listening. This practice does not deplete them, it enriches them. It connects them to the heart of others and to the heart of themselves. It is the ultimate form of information gathering, collecting not just sterile facts, but a rich harvest of emotional, non-verbal, and intuitive data. With this complete and nuanced understanding of reality, gathered in the stillness of deep listening, they are now perfectly prepared for the next great power that arises from silence, the dawning of a clear and unshakable mind. Through the art of deep listening, we transform ourselves into vessels of rich, multi-layered information. We gather not just words, but emotions, intentions, and unspoken truths. We have successfully curbed the outward flow of our energy and reversed it, creating an inner reservoir of presence. But this is only half of the equation. A library filled with 1,000,000 books is useless if the books are untitled, disorganized, and thrown in chaotic piles. To possess information is not the same as to possess understanding. The next great power that arises from silence is the ability to bring order to this inner world, to move from the chaos of raw data to the sublime coherence of clarity. Silence is the crucible in which the fog of mental confusion is burned away, revealing the sharp, luminous landscape of a clear mind. The ancient sages used a powerful metaphor to describe this process. The mind is like the surface of a lake. When we are constantly speaking, constantly reacting, constantly churning with internal chatter, it is as if a ceaseless wind is blowing across this lake. The surface is agitated, broken into 1,000 chaotic ripples and waves. When we look into a lake in this state, we cannot see a clear reflection of the sky above. We see only a distorted, fragmented, and confusing image. We mistake the turbulent motion of the waves, our own reactive thoughts, for reality itself. We live our lives reacting to these distorted reflections, never perceiving the world as it truly is. This is the state of mental fog, of confusion. The practice of silence is the act of stopping the wind. When we cease our endless talking and quiet the inner monologue, the wind dies down. The frantic waves begin to subside. The small ripples flatten out until the surface of the lake becomes perfectly still, like a sheet of dark glass. Only then, in this profound stillness, can it perfectly reflect the vast, clear sky, the unmoving mountains, the silent moon. Clarity is not something we create. It is our mind's natural state. It is not something we must add, but a reality that is revealed when we take the disturbances away. The wise person understands that a clear mind is not the result of more thinking, but of less noise. This clarity grants us access to one of the most liberating human faculties, the ability to escape autopilot. Most of our lives are governed by a deeply ingrained pattern of stimulus and response. An external event happens, a critical comment, a traffic jam, an unexpected bill, and an immediate, automatic reaction is triggered within us. Anger, anxiety, or defensiveness erupts, and a torrent of words and actions follows, often with regrettable consequences. We feel like puppets, our strings pulled by external circumstances. Silence is what allows us to cut these strings. It creates a space, a sacred pause between the stimulus and the response. Imagine someone directs an unkind word towards you. The autopilot reaction is to immediately fire back with a defensive or equally unkind word. But the person who has practiced silence has a different capacity. The unkind word arrives, and instead of an instant reaction, a space of quiet awareness opens up. In this space, which may last only a second or two, they can observe the initial inner reaction, the flush of heat to the face, the tightening in the chest, the ego's cry of being wronged. They can witness this inner storm without being swept away by it. And from this place of calm observation, they can make a conscious choice. They can ask, is a response truly necessary? What is the wisest, most compassionate way to proceed. They might choose to respond calmly, or they might choose the profound power of not responding at all. They have moved from being a slave to their reactions, to being the master of their responses. This sacred pause, this moment of freedom, is the gift of a silent mind. Furthermore, silence is the ultimate organizer of thought. Our minds are constantly taking in information from countless sources, conversations, books, articles, observations. In a noisy, reactive state, this information exists as a chaotic jumble, like a room where furniture, clothes, and papers are all thrown together without order. We may feel intelligent because the room is full, but we cannot function effectively because we can't find anything we need. Silence is the act of quietly and patiently tidying this room. When we sit in stillness, free from the need to speak or take in new information, the mind naturally begins its sorting process. It picks up disparate pieces of information and begins to see connections. An idea from a book read 5 years ago suddenly links with a comment a friend made last week. An observation from a walk in nature suddenly illuminates a difficult problem at work. In the quiet, these fragments self-organize. They begin to form patterns, to coalesce into larger structures of understanding. This is the process of synthesis, of moving from mere knowledge to deep wisdom. It is a process that cannot be forced. It can only happen when we provide the quiet, uncluttered space for the mind to do its own innate, intelligent work. It is in this quiet, organized space that true insight is born. An insight, that eureka moment of sudden understanding, is not the product of linear, logical thought. Logic can take you from A to B to C, but insight is a quantum leap from A to Z. It is a flash of holistic seeing, a new way of perceiving a problem that reveals the solution instantly. The chattering, analytical mind, the ego mind that is so busy talking and doing, is often a barrier to this deeper form of intelligence. Insights arise from the quieter, more associative, subconscious parts of our awareness. This is precisely why our best ideas often come to us, not when we are hunched over a desk, forcing a solution, but in moments of quiet repose in the shower, on a long walk, or in the moments just before sleep. The story of the ancient Greek scientist Archimedes is the classic illustration of this principle. He was tasked by the king with a vexing problem to determine if a crown was made of pure gold without damaging it. He obsessed over the problem, thinking, calculating, and stressing all noisy, effortful mental activities. The solution eluded him. It was only when he gave up the struggle, when he let go and entered a state of quiet, physical relaxation in his bath, that the insight struck. As he saw the water level rise, his quiet mind, free from the tyranny of forceful effort, made the instantaneous connection between volume and displacement. Eureka, I have found it. That cry was not the sound of a conclusion. It was the sound of a discovery made possible only when the noisy, striving mind got out of the way and allowed a deeper intelligence to speak. Thus, the silence we cultivate is not a dull, empty state. It is the very precondition for a sharp, vibrant, and creative mind. It stills the chaotic waters so we can see reality clearly. It provides the sacred pause in which freedom and wisdom are born. It is the quiet space where knowledge organizes itself into understanding, and where understanding blossoms into transformative insight. With a mind now possessing this newfound clarity, we are equipped for an even more profound task. We can now turn this clear, steady light of awareness inward, not just upon our thoughts, but upon the powerful, turbulent, and often bewildering currents of our own emotions. We are now ready to learn how silence allows us to navigate our inner world with grace and skill, with a mind now polished to the mirror-like finish of clarity. We are able to perceive our own inner world with an unprecedented acuity, and what we see moving within this clear space are the great, powerful currents of our emotions. For many of us, our emotions feel like unpredictable weather systems, storms of rage, thick fogs of sorrow, or sudden bolts of anxiety that seem to come from nowhere and seize control of our lives. Our relationship with them is often one of warfare. We either attempt to suppress them, trying to force the storm into a locked cellar, or we are completely consumed by them, becoming the storm itself. Both approaches are exhausting and ineffective. Suppression leads to a brittle, inauthentic life and eventual, unexpected explosions. Uncontrolled expression leaves a wake of broken relationships and deep regret. Silence, however, offers a third path, a way of wisdom. It allows us to become not a soldier at war with our feelings, but a skilled and compassionate meteorologist of our own heart, capable of navigating any weather with grace. It provides the essential buffer that transforms our emotions from tyrannical masters into wise, energetic messengers. Our first and most common mistake is to speak from the epicenter of an emotional storm, when a powerful feeling like anger or grief hijacks our nervous system. Our primal brain, the amygdala, takes the helm. In this state, logic and reason are offline. To speak at this moment is to pour fuel on a raging fire. The words we choose are rarely precise or helpful. They are incendiary. They are absolute and accusatory, riddled with the language of always and never. We are not communicating. We are venting, spraying the volatile energy of our raw emotion onto whomever is nearest. While this venting might provide a fleeting sense of release, it is a profoundly damaging act. Outwardly, it burns bridges and inflicts wounds that words, once spoken, can never fully retract. Inwardly, the act of speaking our anger aloud actually deepens the neural pathways for that very emotion. We are, in essence, practicing being angry, making it easier and more automatic for the storm to gather force the next time. We are not releasing the emotion, we are reinforcing it, carving its channel deeper into the landscape of our mind. Silence offers a radical alternative. It creates a container. Imagine an emotion not as a fire to be extinguished, but as a quantity of boiling water. To suppress it is to clamp a lid on the pot, building up immense pressure that will inevitably lead to a dangerous explosion. To express it reactively is to hurl the boiling water at the wall, scalding everything in sight. The path of silence is to simply hold the pot with steady, heat-resistant hands. The container does not judge the water for being hot. It does not try to change it. It simply holds it, allowing the heat to exist within a safe and defined space. This is the practice of sitting with an emotion when a wave of anger or sadness arises. The silent practice is to turn your awareness inward. Instead of immediately crafting a story about why you feel this way or who is to blame, you simply observe the raw, physical sensations of the emotion. Where is it in your body? Is it a tightness in your chest, a burning heat in your face, a hollow ache in your stomach? You breathe into this sensation. You allow it to be there, without needing it to go away. This is not suppression. It is a profound act of acceptance. You are creating a compassionate space within yourself for the emotion to live out its natural course. And in this safe container, you discover a remarkable truth. No emotion is permanent. Held in awareness, its energy will naturally transform and, in its own time, dissipate. Within this silent, compassionate container, we gain the ability to perform a kind of inner alchemy. We can begin to trace the emotion to its true source. Emotions are rarely about what they appear to be about on the surface. The flash of anger when someone cuts you off in traffic is likely not about the traffic at all. It might be displaced frustration from a difficult day at work. The sharp irritation you feel at a partner's minor habit may be a mask for a deeper feeling of being unheard or unappreciated. The noise of reactive speech keeps us stuck at the surface, endlessly battling the symptoms. The quiet of inner investigation allows us to find the root. In the stillness, we can gently ask ourselves, what is this feeling truly about? What is the more vulnerable feeling hiding beneath this anger? What need of mine is not being met right now? This quiet inquiry moves us from a position of blame to one of profound self-understanding. The focus shifts from, you did this to me, to I feel this way because I need. This insight is the key that unlocks us from the prison of our own reactivity. We stop being victims of our feelings and become curious students of their wisdom. There is a beautiful Zen parable that captures this entire process. A young cow was terribly distressed by its own shadow. On a hot, sunny day, it saw this dark, persistent shape attached to its feet and perceived it as a separate, menacing entity. It decided to escape it. It began to run, but the faster it ran, the faster the shadow followed. It galloped across the dusty plains, kicking up clouds of dirt, its heart pounding with fear and frustration. It ran until its legs ached and its lungs burned, but the shadow remained, stubbornly tethered to it. The cow's struggle was exhausting and utterly futile. Finally, collapsing from exhaustion, the cow gave up the fight. It spotted a large, ancient banyan tree and sought refuge in its cool, deep shade. It lay down in the grass, closed its eyes, and surrendered to a state of simple, silent rest. After a few moments, it opened its eyes, and to its astonishment, it saw the shadow, its dark tormentor, lying peacefully on the ground right beside it. Also resting in the cool shade, the cow finally understood. The shadow was never an enemy to be outrun. It was simply a part of itself, and it would only find peace when the cow did. Our difficult emotions are this shadow, our frantic running, our distractions, our reactive words. This is our futile attempt to escape them. The great banyan tree is the sanctuary of silent, accepting awareness. When we cease our struggle and simply rest in this quiet space, our shadows rest with us. Thus, silence fundamentally rewrites our relationship with the emotional dimension of our being. It is the buffer that absorbs the initial, volatile shock of a feeling, preventing it from immediately translating into harmful action or speech. It is the compassionate container that allows us to hold our own pain without being shattered by it. And it is the quiet laboratory in which we can analyze this raw energy and distill it into precious self-knowledge. We learn that our emotions are not random interruptions to our peace. They are an intelligent guidance system, constantly pointing us toward our unmet needs, our deepest fears, and our greatest opportunities for growth. When we learn to listen to them in this silent, respectful way, their energy is no longer a destructive force. It becomes a source of profound wisdom. And once our words are no longer driven by these unexamined, reactive energies, the very nature of our speech begins to change. It becomes more intentional, more skillful, and infinitely more powerful. We are now ready to explore the art of speaking from this place of inner peace and clarity. The art the Buddha called right speech. Having learned to hold our emotions within a silent, compassionate container, we arrive at a pivotal moment of choice. Silence is not an end in itself. It is the sacred ground from which intentional action can grow. The wise person is not a mute recluse. They are an active participant in the world, and their primary tool of engagement is speech. But the words they utter are of a profoundly different quality than those that pour forth from an unexamined mind. They spring not from the turbulent waters of reactive emotion, but from the deep, clear well of a cultivated stillness. This is the practice of samavaka, or right speech, a cornerstone of the Buddha's noble eightfold path. It is the art of transforming our words from sources of conflict and confusion into instruments of healing, clarity, and connection. It recognizes that every word we speak is a seed, and right speech is the wisdom of planting only the seeds that will bear wholesome fruit. The practice is elegantly simple in its structure, yet infinitely profound in its application. Before speaking, the wise person filters their intention through a series of 4 gates, or sieves. If the intended words cannot pass through all 4, the most skillful action is the one they have so patiently cultivated: noble silence. The first gate is that of truth. Is what I am about to say true? This question goes deeper than a simple avoidance of outright lies. It is a commitment to intellectual and perceptual honesty. It asks us to distinguish between what we know for a fact, what we believe to be true, and what is merely an assumption or a second-hand rumor. It requires us to abandon exaggeration, that subtle form of falsehood we use to make our stories more dramatic or our own role more significant. It asks us to speak from a place of clarity and to have the humility to remain silent when we are unsure. To pass through this gate is to dedicate oneself to being a force for reality in a world awash with distortion. But truth alone is not enough. A statement can be true, yet utterly destructive. This brings us to the second gate benefit. Is what I am about to say useful or beneficial. This is the great filter that eliminates the vast majority of our verbal output. It is the sworn enemy of idle gossip, of complaining that has no aim, and of commentary that serves only to display one's own cleverness. Before speaking, we must ask, what is my true intention here? Will these words help to solve a problem? Or will they merely complicate it? Will they build someone up? Or will they subtly tear them down? Will they bring harmony to a situation? Or will they sow discord to speak of another's faults? Even if the faults are real, serves no benefit if the person is not present, or if the context is not one of constructive help. To complain about the weather or the traffic offers no solution, but merely spreads a low-grade psychic pollution. This gate demands that our words have a purpose, that they are not just empty calories for the ego, but nourishing food for the situation at hand. Even if a statement is both true and beneficial, it can still cause immense harm if it is delivered without care. This is the third gate, the gate of kindness or endearment. Are these words kind? Can they be spoken gently? This gate challenges the common and often cruel justification of brutal honesty. The wise person knows that honesty without kindness is merely brutality. It is the understanding that the way something is said is as important as what is said. It is the skill of choosing words that are soft, gentle, and respectful, even when delivering a difficult truth. It is about considering the emotional state of the listener and framing our words in a way that allows them to be received without activating their defenses. A surgeon uses a sharp scalpel, but their touch is precise, gentle, and intended only for healing. A kind word is like that surgical touch. It can cut through confusion and denial, but its ultimate purpose is always to heal, never to wound. This is the gate of the heart, ensuring that our clarity is always tempered with compassion. Finally, even if a statement is true, beneficial, and can be spoken with kindness, there is one final, master-level gate: timing. Is this the right time to speak? The right words spoken at the wrong time become the wrong words. A person in the throes of rage or grief is not receptive to constructive criticism. No matter how true or kindly phrased, advice offered before it is asked for is often perceived as judgment. A joyful announcement shared with someone who has just suffered a loss can feel like a profound act of insensitivity. The wisdom of timing requires the very skill we have been cultivating all along: deep listening. It requires us to attune ourselves to the reality of the present moment, to the emotional and mental state of the other person. It demands a situational awareness that is only possible from a place of inner quiet. Sometimes, the most skillful and compassionate use of speech is to wait. To wait an hour, a day, or a week, until the listener's heart and mind are open and ready to receive. And often, the wisdom of timing reveals that the right time is, in fact, never. In these moments, silence itself becomes the kindest, most beneficial, and truest form of communication. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates embodied this principle perfectly. One day, an acquaintance ran up to him, agitated and bursting with news. "Socrates," he said, "do you know what I just heard about one of your friends? Hold on a moment." Socrates replied calmly, holding up a hand. Before you tell me, I'd like you to run your news through a little test. I call it the test of the 3 sieves. The man looked confused. The first sieve, Socrates explained, is the sieve of truth. Are you absolutely certain that what you are about to tell me is true? The man hesitated. Well, no. He admitted, I just heard it from someone else. I see, Socrates said. Then let us try the second sieve. The sieve of goodness. Is what you are about to tell me about my friend something good? The man shuffled his feet. No. On the contrary. So, Socrates continued, you wish to tell me something bad about my friend, and you are not even certain that it is true. Let us use the third and final sieve, the sieve of usefulness. Is this news about my friend going to be useful to me? The man, now looking quite ashamed, shook his head. No, not really. Well then, Socrates concluded with a gentle smile. If what you want to tell me is neither true, nor good, nor useful, why tell it to me at all? This is the very process that unfolds within the mind of the wise. The silent space they have cultivated is not empty. It is a purification chamber for their words. An impulse to speak arises, and in that sacred pause between impulse and action, the 4 questions are asked. The words are filtered through the sieves of truth, benefit, kindness, and timing. What emerges from this process is a form of speech that is potent and pure. It is speech that can clarify confusion, soothe hurt feelings, and inspire right action. It is the recognition that our words are a tremendous power, capable of creating heavens or hells for ourselves and for others. By practicing right speech, we learn to be responsible stewards of this power, using it not to add to the world's noise, but to contribute to its harmony. This careful, intentional way of speaking has a profound effect, not just on others, but on the speaker themselves. It cultivates a presence, an aura of gravitas and trustworthiness that can be felt even before a single word is uttered. When speech becomes a finely honed instrument, used with the precision, purpose, and kindness of a master artisan, the silence that surrounds it begins to resonate with a new power. It is no longer merely a pause or a space between words, but a charged and potent field of energy. It is from this field that a profound and authentic form of charisma arises, not the slick, superficial charm of a practiced talker, but the deep, unshakable gravity of a centered soul. This is the unspoken charisma of presence, a magnetism that does not need to announce itself, for it is felt by everyone in the room. It is the quiet authority that comes not from what one says, but from the fullness of the silence from which one speaks. We can understand this power by exploring the paradox of emptiness and fullness. The person who feels a constant need to speak, to fill every silence with anecdotes, opinions, and chatter, is often, paradoxically, operating from a place of inner emptiness. Their ceaseless stream of words is a defense mechanism, a frantic attempt to build a wall of noise around a hollow core of insecurity. They are like a rattling container, making a great deal of sound precisely because it is mostly empty inside. Their energy is constantly being projected outward, scattered to the winds with every sentence, leaving their own center depleted. Their need to be heard, to be seen, to be validated through speech, betrays a fundamental lack of self-possession. They are seeking their sense of worth from the outside world, and their words are the currency they use to try and purchase it. Conversely, the person who is comfortable in silence radiates an aura of inner fullness. Their silence is not a void, it is a reservoir. It comes from a place of deep self-acceptance, a quiet confidence that has no need for external validation. They are like a deep, still lake, whose power lies in its immense, silent volume, not in the noisy bubbling of a shallow brook, because they are not constantly leaking their energy through unnecessary speech. Their inner resources are consolidated, creating a palpable sense of solidity and stability. They are not trying to prove their worth, they are simply abiding in it. This quality of self-possession is immensely attractive. We are unconsciously drawn to those who seem complete within themselves, who are not seeking anything from us, but are simply willing to share their presence. Their silence is not intimidating, it is inviting. It is a sign of a spirit that is full, not empty. This inner fullness allows them to offer the world the rarest and most precious of gifts, their undivided presence. This is the active ingredient of their charisma. In our culture of perpetual distraction, to be truly seen and heard is an almost miraculous experience. When you are with a person who has mastered the art of silence, you feel this miracle. As you speak, they are not simply waiting for their turn. They are not formulating a reply, checking a phantom notification on their phone, or letting their mind wander to their evening plans. Their awareness is focused on you with a laser-like intensity. Their quiet, receptive presence becomes a vessel for your own thoughts and feelings. To be witnessed in this way is to be profoundly validated. It is a silent communication that says, "You matter. Your words matter. In this moment, nothing is more important than you." This selfless gift of pure attention forges an immediate and powerful bond of trust and rapport. It is a magnetism born not of clever words, but of generous, silent attention. We call it charisma, but it is, at its heart, a profound act of love. This economy of speech also has a powerful effect on the words that are chosen. It invokes a simple but potent principle: scarcity increases value. The words of a person who talks incessantly become part of the background noise. Like the hum of an appliance, we learn to tune them out. But when a person who is habitually silent finally chooses to speak, their words land with incredible weight. The room grows quiet. People lean in. The preceding silence acts as a velvet cushion upon which the jewel of their speech is placed, or as a vast, dark sky against which their words ignite like stars. Each word is imbued with a perceived significance because it has been carefully chosen and has passed through the rigorous gates of truth, benefit, kindness, and timing. This gives their speech a natural authority. They do not need to raise their voice or use aggressive language to command attention. The power is inherent in the deliberate, considered nature of their communication, made all the more potent by the silent space it emerges from. History provides us with powerful exemplars of this silent charisma. Consider the presence of Abraham Lincoln. Accounts from his contemporaries frequently describe him as melancholic, thoughtful, and prone to long periods of quiet contemplation. Even amidst the turmoil of his cabinet meetings, his speeches, which changed the course of a nation, were not the ramblings of an impulsive talker, but the carefully distilled product of immense inner reflection. His silence was not empty. It was filled with the weight of his thoughts and the gravity of his purpose, and it gave him an aura of profound, world-weary wisdom. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi, a physically frail man who led a superpower to its knees, rooted his immense strength in silence. He observed a day of complete silence, Mauna Vrat, every week for much of his adult life. He understood that his true power did not come from political rhetoric, but from an unshakable inner resolve that was cultivated and fortified in stillness. His confidence was not a performance, it was a state of being. It needed no advertisement, for it was self-evident in his calm, centered, and silent presence. This, then, is the unspoken charisma we seek. It is not a social strategy to be deployed, but an authentic radiance that emanates from a well-tended inner world. It is the natural consequence of a mind that is no longer at war with itself, a heart that is not desperate for validation, and a spirit that is full and self-contained. It is the magnetic pull of a human being who can offer the profound gift of their quiet, undivided attention. This powerful presence is not a trick or a technique. It arises organically from a fundamental shift in how we perceive the world. It is the outcome of learning to see reality, others, and ourselves through a lens that is free from the constant, distorting chatter of the judging mind. We are now ready to step into that silent space of pure observation, the true source of this unshakable peace, the silent charisma we cultivate. That sense of unshakable presence is not a final destination. It is the natural outgrowth of a profound inner transformation, a fundamental rewiring of our relationship with reality itself. We now arrive at the very heart of the practice, the engine room where wisdom is forged. The silent space we have so carefully cultivated becomes our private laboratory for conducting the most important experiment of all, the observation of experience, before it is contaminated by judgment. It is here, in this inner stillness, that we learn to dismantle the most deep-seated and troublesome habit of the human mind, the relentless, automatic, and often unconscious act of labeling everything as either good or bad. This is the practice of non-judgment, and it is the direct path to seeing the world and ourselves as they truly are. The mind, in its untrained state, is a compulsive judge. It is a labeling machine operating at superhuman speed. From the moment we awaken, the process begins. The taste of coffee is good. The sound of rain outside is bad because it will complicate the commute. An email from a colleague is annoying. A memory of a past success is pleasant. This process is so constant and so automatic that we do not even recognize it as an activity we are performing. We mistake our judgments for reality. We do not think, "I am having the thought that this traffic is bad." We simply experience bad traffic. We believe we are reacting to the world itself. But in truth, we are reacting to the second layer of reality we have created with our own labels. This is the primary source of our suffering, or dukkha. It is not our experiences that cause us pain, but our resistance to the ones we have labeled bad, and our desperate craving for the ones we have labeled good. We are living in a constant state of either pushing reality away or grasping at it, never simply allowing it to be. The practice of noble silence is the method by which we interrupt this automatic process. It creates a crucial space between the raw sensory input of an experience and the mind's habitual rush to slap a label on it. Within this silent, observant space, we practice a new skill, bare attention. This is the act of simply noticing, of registering the presence of a thought, a feeling, or a sensation without immediately engaging the machinery of judgment. Let's say a feeling of anxiety arises. The old, reactive habit would be to immediately label it bad. This label then triggers a secondary reaction. I hate feeling anxious. I need to get rid of this feeling. What's wrong with me? We are now at war with our own experience. With the practice of bare attention, the process is radically different. The feeling of anxiety arises. In the silent space of awareness, we simply note its presence. There is anxiety. We do not call it good or bad. We get curious. We observe it as we would a passing cloud. What are its physical characteristics? A tightness in the solar plexus, a quickening of the breath. We just watch it, without resistance and without attachment. We are no longer the victim of the feeling. We are the calm, impartial scientist observing it. This practice leads to the core insight of vipassana, or clear seeing, the ability to see things as they are, unadorned by the distorting filigree of our likes and dislikes. To see without judgment is to see with a pristine clarity. In a moment of conflict with another person, for example, the untrained mind immediately jumps to labels. He is wrong. He is being unreasonable. I am right. The entire experience is framed as a battle to be won. The practitioner of non-judgment, however, has a different capacity. In the quiet space within, they can observe the unfolding events with bare attention. They note, there is a feeling of anger arising in my body. There is a tightening in my jaw. The sound of his voice has a high pitch. My mind is generating thoughts of self-defense. By deconstructing the experience into its neutral compare, they are not swept away by the overarching drama of being right. They remain grounded in reality, able to respond to the actual situation with far more skill and compassion, rather than just reacting to their own story about it. There is a timeless Taoist parable that brilliantly illustrates this profound wisdom. An old farmer lived in a poor village. He was considered well off, for he owned a horse. One day, his horse ran away. All his neighbors came to console him. What terrible luck, they said. The farmer simply replied, "Good luck, bad luck." Who knows, a few days later, his horse returned, bringing with it a dozen wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to congratulate him. "What wonderful luck," they exclaimed. The farmer, unmoved, replied, "Good luck, bad luck. Who knows?" The farmer's son then began the work of taming the wild horses. While riding one, he was thrown off and broke his leg. The neighbors came once more, full of commiseration. "Oh, What dreadful luck, they lamented. And again, the farmer quietly said, "Good luck. Bad luck. Who knows, the very next week." Military officials came to the village to conscript all the able-bodied young men into the army for a war from which few were expected to return. Because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was the only young man in the village they left behind. The farmer embodies the mind of non-judgment. He did not get caught in the immediate, reactive labeling of events. He understood that reality is an infinitely complex and interconnected web, and that the ultimate consequences of any single event are impossible to know. He inhabited a state of wise, patient observation, allowing life to unfold without imposing his own narrative of good or bad upon it. This is not a state of passive resignation. It is a state of profound freedom. He was free from the emotional roller coaster of elation and despair that his neighbors were riding. He maintained his inner peace, his equanimity, because his well-being was not dependent on external circumstances conforming to his desires. His strength came from his ability to remain in the quiet, observant senteur, watching the story unfold without becoming lost in it. This is the freedom we are cultivating in our silence. We are learning to be the farmer, not the neighbors. We are practicing the art of letting reality be what it is. Before we try to make it into something else, this does not mean we do not act or that we have no preferences. It means our actions spring from a clear seeing of what is, rather than a frantic reaction against what we think shouldn't be, by dropping the exhausting, lifelong habit of judging every moment. We find that a great burden is lifted from our shoulders. We step out of the courtroom of our own mind and into the fresh, open air of simple, direct experience. And as we continue to watch this direct experience from our silent vantage point, a deeper, even more transformative pattern begins to reveal itself. We begin to see not just the nature of our judgments, but the very nature of reality itself. We are now standing at the threshold of understanding one of the most fundamental laws of existence, the law of impermanence. As we abide in the silent, non-judgmental space, we have cultivated a space free from the compulsive need to label our experience. We begin to perceive the world with a startling new clarity. We have cleared the lens, and now, as we gaze through this clean lens at the landscape of our own consciousness, a fundamental characteristic of reality, one that was previously obscured by the fog of our opinions, comes into sharp focus. We begin to witness, not as a concept, but as a direct, lived experience, the profound and universal truth of anicca, the law of impermanence. We discover that silence is not just a space of peace. It is the ultimate classroom for learning that everything, without exception, is in a constant state of flow, and that all our suffering arises from our futile attempts to build a permanent home on the shifting sands of time. This direct seeing begins with the simple observation of our own mind in meditation. When we first sit in silence, our inner world may seem like a solid, chaotic mass of thoughts and feelings. But as our attention becomes more stable and refined, we begin to see that it is not a solid mass at all, but a flickering, ceaseless stream. A thought about a task we must do tomorrow arises. We note its presence, and before we can even fully grasp it, it has dissolved, replaced by a vivid memory from 10 years ago. That memory too shimmers for a moment and then vanishes, succeeded by a wave of boredom, which in turn is replaced by the sound of a distant siren. We try to hold on to a peaceful feeling, to savor it, but it slips through the fingers of our awareness like water. We try to push away a feeling of anxiety, but our very pushing seems to feed it, until it, too, eventually exhausts itself and transforms into something else. In the silent laboratory of the mind, we become intimate with this process. We see that every thought, every emotion, every sensation, every sound has a birth, a brief life, and a death. Our inner world is not a static entity. It is a dynamic, effervescent process of arising and passing. Arising and passing. There is nothing solid to hold on to. We are not observing a collection of things, but witnessing a river of endless change. To truly understand this truth in the marrow of our bones is to fundamentally alter our relationship with pleasure and pain. The engine of our suffering, our chronic dissatisfaction, is fueled by a profound misunderstanding of impermanence. When a pleasant experience arises, a moment of joy, a feeling of love, a taste of success, our deeply ingrained habit is to cling to it. We grasp at it, desperate to make it last, to turn a fleeting moment into a permanent state. This clinging, this grasping, is the very source of our suffering. Because all things are subject to anicca, the pleasant experience will change, the joy will fade, the moment will pass. Our suffering is not caused by the fact that it passes, but by the fact that we tried to prevent it from passing. We suffer because we are fighting a battle against the fundamental nature of reality, a battle we can never win. Conversely, when an unpleasant experience arises, physical pain, a feeling of failure, a wave of grief, our habit is one of aversion. We push it away. We resist it. We deny it. We create a story about how this feeling is wrong and should not be here. This resistance is a form of energetic fuel. It is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes immense effort, and the moment our concentration wavers, the ball shoots to the surface with even greater force. Our suffering is not caused by the pain itself, but by our secondary layer of resistance to the pain. The silent observation of anicca teaches us a third way, a path of wisdom that transcends this exhausting cycle of craving and aversion. When pleasure arises, we can learn to savor it fully and gratefully, without the anxious need to make it permanent. We enjoy the beauty of the wave without expecting it to stay frozen on the shore. And when pain arises, we can learn to meet it with a courageous and patient acceptance, knowing that it too is a temporary guest in our awareness. We feel the storm without becoming the storm, secure in the knowledge that, like all weather, it will pass. This is the beginning of equanimity, the balanced and spacious heart that is not thrown into chaos by the inevitable ups and downs of life. There is a timeless story, told in many traditions, of a great king who possessed immense power and wealth, yet found himself a slave to his own volatile moods. In times of victory, he was consumed by an arrogant pride, and in times of defeat, he was plunged into a black despair. He summoned the wisest sage in his kingdom and commanded him, "Fashion for me a ring so magical that when I am sad, it will make me happy. The sage returned some time later with a simple golden band. The king was unimpressed until he saw a tiny inscription on the inside. The sage instructed him to look at it only in his moments of deepest despair and greatest triumph. Some months later, the king's army suffered a catastrophic defeat. His enemies were at the gates, and in his shame and sorrow, the king fled to a private chamber. Intending to end his own life, he collapsed in despair, and as he wept, his eye caught the glint of the ring. He remembered the sage's words and read the inscription, "This too shall pass." A profound stillness washed over him. He understood his despair, his defeat, his shame. They were not a permanent reality. They were a passing storm. With newfound fortitude, he endured the night. Years later, having rebuilt his kingdom to even greater glory, he was presiding over a grand victory parade. Adoring crowds cheered his name, and his heart swelled with immense pride and a sense of invincible power. At the peak of his elation, he glanced down at his ring and saw the same words, "This too shall pass." A wave of humility cooled his arrogant heart. He understood that this glory, this victory, this adoration, this too was a temporary state. The ring was his constant teacher of anicca. It kept him humble in success and resilient in failure, allowing him to rule from a place of unshakable inner balance. This law of impermanence is not just for kings, and it does not only apply to grand events. It is the very rhythm of existence, happening in every moment, in every breath. As you sit in silence, you can witness it in the simple act of breathing. The in-breath is a birth, an expansion, a receiving of life. There is a brief pause. The out-breath is a death, a letting go, a release. This cycle of micro-birth and micro-death happens again and again, a constant, tangible demonstration of the universal process of arising and ceasing. To watch the breath is to watch the universe in miniature. This is not a morbid or depressing thought. It is a profoundly liberating one. It frees us from the impossible burden of trying to hold things together, to freeze life in a state that we prefer. It allows us to relax, to let go, and to participate in the great, graceful dance of existence with more trust and less fear. In the profound stillness of our practice, we have moved from merely believing that things change to knowing it with every fiber of our being. We have witnessed the ceaseless, flowing river of our own experience. This direct seeing of anicca is the antidote to clinging, the foundation of peace. But this very insight, this clear seeing of universal flux, inevitably gives rise to a deeper, more startling question. If everything I perceive, every thought, every feeling, every sensation, my very body is in a constant state of change, then who or what is the unchanging I that is witnessing all of this? If my entire reality is a river, where is the solid ground upon which the observer stands with this question? We stand at the precipice of an even more profound discovery, the investigation into the nature of the self itself. Our silent observation has led us to the edge of a profound cliff. By watching the relentless river of our experience, we have viscerally understood the truth of anicca. or impermanence. We have seen that nothing we can perceive, not a thought, not a feeling, not a sensation, is solid or lasting. This liberating insight, however, inevitably gives rise to a question that is at once terrifying and thrilling, a question that shakes the very foundation of our identity. If everything that flows through my awareness is impermanent, then who or what is the permanent I that is doing the perceiving? If the contents of the house are constantly changing, where is the unchanging owner of the house? It is here, in the deepest quiet, that we begin to investigate the second great mark of existence, the most radical and liberating of the Buddha's insights, anatta, or not self. This is the discovery that the solid, separate self we believe ourselves to be is, in fact, the most masterful illusion of all. To understand this, we must first examine the architecture of this thing we call the ego or the self. It is a psychological construct built piece by piece from the moment we are born, and its primary building material is language. The ego is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. This story is composed of a near constant stream of I statements. I am a kind person. I am not good at math. I am a spiritual seeker. It is fortified by the possessive case, my body, my job, my reputation, my opinion. It is a collage of memories from the past, social roles we play in the present, and hopes and fears for the future. We stitch this collage together with a continuous internal narrative, a voice in the head that is constantly commentating, judging, and defining. This narrator creates a central character, a protagonist in the movie of our life. This character feels solid, continuous, and real. We become so identified with this character that we forget we are the silent awareness in which the character's story is simply appearing. The practice of deep silence is a systematic process of dismantling this very structure. It deconstructs the ego by starving it of its primary food source, the narrative. When we commit to noble silence, we cease the endless verbal reinforcement of our identity. We stop telling our stories, defending our opinions, and polishing the image of our character. Inwardly, by practicing bare attention, we witness thoughts arising and passing away without claiming them as mine. An angry thought appears in the mind. Instead of thinking I am angry, we learn to simply note anger is present. A memory of a past failure surfaces. Instead of thinking I am a failure, we note a memory of failure is arising. This simple shift in language and perception is revolutionary. It creates a space between awareness and the contents of awareness. We begin to see that thoughts, feelings, and sensations are impersonal, conditioned phenomena that flow through our consciousness, much like weather passing through the sky. The sky does not own the clouds. Awareness does not own the thoughts. By ceasing our claim of ownership, the central character, the ego, begins to lose its substance. It is like a ghost that begins to turn transparent when you stop believing in it. This passive observation can then be deepened through active inquiry. In the quiet of meditation, we can begin to ask the profound question, who is it that is aware? We turn our attention inward, not to find an answer in words, But to perform a search, we look for the thinker behind the thought. We search for the feeler behind the feeling. We try to pinpoint the location of this I who is supposedly in charge. And in this deep, silent looking, we make a startling discovery. We cannot find it. There is no central command module, no little homunculus sitting in a control room in the brain. The deeper we look for a solid, independent self, the more we find only the interconnected, impermanent processes of thinking, feeling, and sensing. What we discover is that the I is not a noun, but a verb. It is not a thing, but an activity. And when the search for the observer comes up empty, our identity can begin to shift. We realize we are not the small, separate character in the story. We are the vast, open, silent awareness in which the entire story is unfolding. We are the sky, not the clouds. The profound, practical implications of this shift are beautifully illustrated in a classic Taoist parable from the sage Chuang Tzu. Imagine a man paddling his boat across a river on a misty morning. He is alone and at peace. Suddenly, with a jarring crash, another boat collides with his. His peace is shattered. Instantly, he is filled with rage. He stands up and begins shouting insults at the person in the other boat, cursing their carelessness and stupidity. But as he shouts, the mist begins to clear, and he sees that the boat that struck his is empty. It simply broke free from its moorings upstream and drifted down the river. In that moment of seeing, his anger completely vanishes. It evaporates. There is no one to be angry at. The man's anger, he realizes, was not caused by the simple physical event of the collision. It was caused entirely by his assumption that there was a conscious self in the other boat who had wronged his own precious self. When he saw that the boat was empty, his ego had no target, and the anger had no ground on which to stand. This is the wisdom of anatta. We spend so much of our lives in a state of anger, resentment, jealousy, and pride, all of which are based on the collision of our self with another perceived self. When we can begin to see, through the practice of silence, that all boats are, in a sense, empty, that both our own self and the self of the other are impersonal, conditioned processes, the very possibility of these afflictive emotions begins to dissolve. To hear this for the first time can be frightening. If I am not my ego, do I even exist? But anatta is not an annihilation. It is a profound liberation. It does not mean you do not exist. It means you do not exist as the separate, fragile, and needy character you imagined yourself to be. The freedom that comes from this insight is immeasurable. The colossal amount of energy we spend each day defending our ego, protecting our reputation, proving we are right, justifying our actions, nursing our wounded pride is now freed up for more creative and compassionate purposes. The fear of failure and criticism lessens dramatically. For who is there to fail? Who is there to be criticized? We become lighter, more flexible, and more fearless. The hard, sharp boundary between self and other begins to soften and become porous. We see that we are not separate entities, but interconnected waves in a single ocean of existence. In the depths of our silence, we have journeyed from the direct seeing of anicca, the impermanence of all phenomena, to the even more profound seeing of anatta, the transparent, selfless nature of the observer itself. We have seen that the solid statue of the self we have worshipped our entire lives is, in fact, a shimmering, insubstantial mirage. When this powerful illusion begins to fade, what rushes in to fill the space is not the cold, nihilistic void we might have feared. Instead, the natural energy that arises is one of boundless, unconditional warmth for all other beings who are still caught in the struggle of defending their own empty boats. This is the natural birth of karuna, or compassion. The journey into the heart of silence has led us to a startling revelation. The solid, separate self we believed ourselves to be is a transparent illusion, a temporary construct of thoughts and stories. The insight of anatta, or not self, can, at first, feel like a cold and desolate truth, a plunge into a nihilistic void. We might ask, if there is no self, what is left? Am I to become a detached, unfeeling automaton? The wisdom traditions answer with a resounding no. The reality is the precise opposite. The dissolution of the hard, protective shell of the ego does not create a void. It creates an opening, and the energy that naturally flows into this new, open space is the boundless warmth of karuna, deep, résonnant compassion. The silence of the wise is not the cold silence of a distant star. It is the warm, vibrant silence of a mother sitting with her sleeping child. It is a silence that trembles with empathy, born from the direct, seeing that all beings are adrift in the same river, struggling in the same currents of impermanence and confusion. The mechanism of this transformation is beautifully simple. As long as we are trapped in the story of a solid, separate self, we view the world from a fortified position. We see other people as other solid, separate selves, and our interactions are governed by judgment, comparison, and competition. We look at another's anger, greed, or ignorance, and we condemn it because it is their flaw, separate from us. But when the insight of anatta dawns, this entire framework collapses. We have seen the impersonal, conditioned nature of our own mind. We have watched our own thoughts of anger and fear arise and pass away without our command. Now, when we look at another person who is acting out of anger, we no longer see a bad person. We see a fellow being in the grip of the impersonal energy of anger. We see their empty boat being tossed about by a painful current, the very same current that has tossed our own boat so many times. How can you judge another for a struggle you know so intimately in yourself? In that moment of seeing the shared condition, judgment becomes impossible. In its place, a profound sense of kinship arises. This is karuna. It is the recognition of our common humanity, our shared vulnerability, and our collective yearning for peace. This compassion manifests most powerfully not in what we say, but in how we are silent. When someone we care for is in pain, our culture has trained us to react with a flurry of activity. We rush in with advice, solutions, and well-meaning but often empty platitudes. Look on the bright side. Everything happens for a reason. You just need to get out more. More often than not, this verbal activity is not for the benefit of the sufferer, but for the soothing of our own discomfort. Their pain makes us feel helpless, so we talk to feel useful. Their grief makes us feel awkward, so we talk to fill the silence. The compassionate response is often the most radical, to offer the gift of our silent, unwavering presence, to sit with them in their darkness without needing to switch on a light, to be a calm, steady container for their grief, their anger, or their fear, without judging it or trying to fix it. This silent presence is a powerful message. It says, "I am not afraid of your pain. I will not abandon you to it. You do not have to perform for me or pretend to be okay. Your suffering is welcome here." This is the highest form of support, for it validates their experience and gives them the strength and space to find their own way through it. It is the practice of simply being with someone in their truth. This same compassionate energy must also be turned inward. For most of us, the voice of our inner critic is the cruelest voice we know. We hold ourselves to impossible standards and berate ourselves mercilessly for our perceived failings. The silent, non-judgmental awareness we cultivate becomes the foundation for self-compassion. When we make a mistake or fall short of our own ideals, the old habit is to launch a vicious internal attack. But with the practice of karuna, we learn to meet our own imperfections with the same gentle understanding we would offer a beloved friend. In the quiet space of self-reflection, we can acknowledge our error without collapsing into the story that I am a bad person. We can see the action not as a reflection of an inherent flaw, but as the result of a moment of confusion, fear, or suffering. We can hold our own pain with the same tenderness we would offer to another. This is not an act of self-indulgence or an excuse for poor behavior. It is the necessary condition for genuine growth. We cannot build a better version of ourselves on a foundation of self-hatred. True change arises from a place of clear seeing and kind acceptance. The story of the Buddha and the angry man perfectly illustrates this potent blend of strength and compassion. A man, furious for reasons lost to time, came to where the Buddha was teaching and began to insult him with a torrent of vile and abusive language. He screamed and spat, trying with all his might to provoke a reaction. The Buddha did not react. He simply sat in a state of perfect, silent equanimity, his presence like a vast, calm ocean completely absorbing the man's rage. The man eventually exhausted himself, his fury spent, and stood panting in the sudden, ringing silence. The Buddha then looked at him with clear, gentle eyes and asked a simple question. "My friend," he said, "if you buy a gift for someone, and that person does not accept your gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, taken aback, considered for a moment and replied, "Well, it would belong to me, of course, for I was the one who bought it." The Buddha nodded and said, "Exactly, and so it is with your anger. You have come here and offered it to me as a gift. I do not accept it." With that, he fell silent again, leaving the man to contemplate the profound truth that the poison he had tried to give away had remained in his own hands. The Buddha's silence was not weakness or passivity. It was an act of supreme strength and double-edged compassion. It was compassionate to himself as he refused to ingest the poison of another's hatred, and it was deeply compassionate to the man, as he refused to engage in the transaction of anger, which would only have escalated the man's suffering. Instead, he held up a perfect mirror in which the man could see the true nature of his own actions. This is the silence of karuna. It is a silence that protects, that teaches, and that heals. It is the natural expression of a heart that has understood the truth of our interconnectedness, our shared struggles, and our common desire to be free from suffering. When one sees the world through this lens of profound compassion, a natural desire arises to lessen this suffering, both in oneself and in others. One begins to see with unbearable clarity how much of our pain is self-inflicted, born from our desperate clinging to things that are destined to change. This seeing leads to a deep, intuitive urge to let go. This is not a grim or joyless act, but a joyful unburdening, a casting off of heavy weights. It is the beginning of the path of renunciation. The light of compassion, born from the direct seeing of our shared human condition, illuminates the world in a new way. We see with a painful clarity how much of the world's suffering, our own included, arises from a single, tragic source: the desperate, white-knuckled clinging to things that are, by their very nature, destined to change. We cling to pleasure. We cling to possessions. We cling to our reputation. We cling to our youth. We cling to our very ideas of who we are. And in this clinging, we create a constant state of tension, anxiety, and fear. When our heart trembles with compassion at this sight, a powerful and intelligent urge arises, the desire to let go. This is the beginning of the path of nekkhamma, a Pali word often translated as renunciation. Yet this translation can be misleading, conjuring images of grim, joyless austerity. A more skillful translation might be relinquishment, letting go, or simply the freedom of unburdening. For nekkhamma is not a punishment we inflict upon ourselves. It is a profound act of wisdom and self-kindness. It is the joyful discovery that our hands must be empty before they can receive anything new. And our most immediate and accessible practice of this art is the renunciation of unnecessary speech. To truly understand renunciation, we must first discard the notion that it is a form of deprivation. Imagine you are on a long and arduous journey through the mountains. At the start of your journey, you believed it was wise to carry a heavy backpack filled with ornate, beautiful rocks. They are impressive to look at, but their weight makes every step a struggle. You are exhausted, your back aches, and your progress is slow. One day, you sit down by a stream and realize the truth. These rocks are not helping you on your journey. They are hindering you. With this clear seeing, you open the backpack and gently place the rocks on the ground. One by one, the act of setting them down is not a painful sacrifice. It is a moment of immense relief, of liberation. A lightness enters your body and your spirit. Now, you can walk freely, with joy and ease. Our attachments are these rocks, our need to be right, our craving for recognition, our desire to control. We mistake these for precious treasures, but they are merely heavy burdens. Renunciation is the simple, intelligent act of recognizing rocks as rocks and choosing to set them down. Every time we choose silence over needless speech, we are practicing this art of relinquishment. We are letting go of the ego's most cherished projects. Consider the deep, instinctual need to be right, to win an argument, to have the last word. This need is a very heavy rock. It drains our energy and creates conflict and separation. To choose silence in a moment of disagreement, not as an act of passive aggression, but as a conscious choice to prioritize harmony over ego victory, is a profound act of renunciation. Consider the constant, low-level performance of modern life. The need to be seen as witty, intelligent, or interesting. We craft stories, polish anecdotes, and search for clever remarks to maintain this persona. This performance is another heavy rock. To choose silence is to renounce this exhausting theater. To trust that our inherent worth is not contingent on our verbal output. It is the relief of stepping off the stage. This silence is a letting go of the need for the world to see us in a certain way, which is the first step toward discovering who we are when no one is watching. Furthermore, so much of our speech is a subtle and often futile attempt to control the uncontrollable. We use words to try and manage others' perceptions of us, to steer events in our favor, and to impose our will upon the natural flow of life. Giving unsolicited advice is a way of trying to control another person's path. Complaining about a situation is a verbal attempt to reject reality, a futile effort to control the past. Speaking with flattery is an attempt to control another's affection. In this light, the choice of silence is a radical act of surrender. It is an acknowledgement that our control is limited, that most events will unfold according to their own complex causes and conditions. Regardless of our commentary, it is a letting go of the exhausting role of general manager of the universe. It is a graceful alignment with the flow of what is, rather than a constant, stressful battle with it. We stop trying to pilot the river and instead learn to navigate its currents with skill and ease. There is a story of a great man who, in the middle of his life, possessed everything our society values: immense wealth, high status, and far-reaching influence. Yet, he felt a profound sense of being burdened, a spiritual suffocation beneath the weight of his own life. To the shock of all who knew him, he renounced it all. He gave away his possessions, relinquished his titles, and became a simple, wandering monk with nothing but his robes and a begging bowl. Years later, some of his old friends, still bewildered by his choice, sought him out. They found him sitting peacefully beneath a large tree in the forest, his face radiating a calm contentment they had never seen in him before. "How could you do it?" they asked. "How could you give up everything? Don't you miss it all terribly?" The monk did not offer a complex philosophical discourse. He simply looked up at the branches of the tree above them. As they watched, a single, brilliant yellow leaf, its time complete, detached itself from the twig and spiraled gently, silently, to the forest floor. The monk then turned to his friends and said, "The leaf does not fight to hold on when its season is over. It does not cry out in fear. It simply lets go. There is no struggle in it, only a deep, quiet rightness." I am learning to be like the leaf. True renunciation is not a violent act of tearing ourselves away from the things we love. It is a natural, graceful release that comes from the wisdom of seeing that a season has passed. It is an alignment with the great, gentle law of impermanence. This path of letting go does not lead to a barren, joyless existence. It leads to its opposite. By renouncing our attachment to having more, we discover the profound happiness of needing less as we release our desperate clinging to status, wealth, and being right. Our needs simplify. We discover that a stable and authentic joy can be found in the simple realities of the present moment. A joy that is not dependent on external conditions. It is the joy of a quiet morning, the taste of a single cup of tea, the feeling of the sun on our skin. The Buddha called this the joy of blamelessness, the sublime contentment that arises when we are no longer driven by the frantic, insatiable hunger of craving. It is the peace of the traveler who has finally set down his heavy bag of rocks. Thus, we see that nekama, this principle of renunciation, is not a denial of life, but a profound affirmation of it. It is the wisdom of letting go of everything that is not essential in order to fully embrace what is. Each moment we choose silence over the ego's demands is a moment of training in this liberating art. But this raises a natural question. If we let go of our ambitions, our desire, our attachments, our stories, what is left? What happens in the space that is created when we set down all this baggage? A common fear is that this space will be a cold, empty void. The profound and paradoxical truth, however, is that this emptiness is not a void. It is a womb. It is the fertile, silent, and unconditioned ground from which true, spontaneous creativity is born. The path of renunciation, of consciously letting go, leads us not into a barren wasteland, but into a silent, open expanse. We have set down the heavy rocks of ego, attachment, and control, and a natural fear may arise. What will we build if we have renounced all our tools and materials, if we are no longer driven by the hungry ghosts of ambition and desire? Will our lives become passive, empty, and devoid of creation? The profound paradox we discover in the heart of silence is that this very emptiness is the most fertile ground of all. This is the great secret known to mystics, artists, and innovators throughout history. The silent, empty mind is not a void. It is a womb. It is the pristine, unconditioned space from which all true, original, and transformative creation is born. Our modern culture has a deep misunderstanding of creativity. We have come to associate it with a kind of noisy, frantic activity. We picture the creative process as a chaotic brainstorming session with whiteboards full of frantic scribbles, or the lone genius struggling through the night, fueled by coffee and wrestling with their demons. We celebrate the cult of busyness, believing that constant motion, rapid iteration, and a flood of ideas are the hallmarks of a creative mind. But this is often not creation. It is merely agitation. It is the act of rearranging existing pieces, of reassembling what is already known in slightly different configurations. It is the work of the conscious, analytical mind. The same ego mind that is so attached to being productive and proving its worth. This kind of work can be clever, and it can be productive, but it rarely gives birth to the genuinely new. It is like endlessly shuffling a deck of cards. You may create many combinations, but you will never draw a card that was not already in the deck. True creativity, the kind that feels less like a struggle and more like a discovery, arises from a very different inner state. It emerges from stillness. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate this ancient wisdom when our minds are intensely focused on a task. A specific set of neural circuits, sometimes called the task-positive network, is highly active. This is the network of doing, of concentrating, of executing. However, when we relax, when we daydream, when we sit in quiet contemplation, a different and equally powerful network awakens the default mode network. This is the brain's dreaming, associative, and integrative self. It is here, in this quieter mode, that the brain makes surprising, long-range connections between seemingly unrelated ideas. It is the neurological source of the aha moment. Constant, noisy effort and the pressure to be creative keep the task-oriented part of our brain in charge, effectively shutting down the very neural architecture that is designed for breakthrough insight. Silence and non-striving are the keys that unlock this deeper creative potential. It is like tending a garden. The noisy effort is the constant, anxious tilling of the soil. The silent practice is allowing the soil to rest, trusting the unseen, underground process of germination from which new life will eventually, in its own time, emerge. This is why inspiration is so often described as a whisper. The muse, that ancient archetype of the creative source, does not shout. She does not deliver her insights in a PowerPoint presentation. Her voice is subtle. A quiet nudge, a fleeting image, a faint melody that floats up from the depths of our being. If our mind is a loud, crowded party, filled with the clamor of our to-do lists, the shouts of our inner critic, the endless newsfeed, and the anxieties of the ego, this delicate whisper will be completely inaudible. We will miss the call. The practice of silence is the art of politely but firmly asking all the noisy guests to leave the party. It is the act of creating an inner environment of quiet hospitality, an attentive stillness, where the voice of the muse feels safe enough to speak. When we are quiet enough, we realize that creativity is not an act of production, but an act of reception. We are not the creator, we are the vessel. Our task is not to force the idea into existence, but to get our noisy, controlling ego out of the way so that the idea can be born through us. We see this principle embodied in the highest forms of art. The most masterful creators are not just masters of what they put in, they are masters of what they leave out. In the world of music, the composer John Cage presented a radical piece called 433, in which a pianist sits at a piano for 4 minutes and 33 seconds and plays nothing. The initial reaction was confusion and outrage, but Cage's point was profound. The music was the composition of unintentional sounds that filled the silence, the coughing of the audience, the hum of the ventilation, the sound of the wind outside. He was teaching us that the space around the notes is a vital part of the musical experience. The great jazz trumpeter Miles Davis was famous for his use of space, for the haunting power of the notes he chose not to play. The silence gave his music its tension, its soul, and its emotional weight. In Japanese traditional arts, this concept is given a name, ma-gan. Ma is the negative space in a Zen ink painting, the silent pause in a no drama, the unadorned space in a room. To the untrained Western eye, this might look like emptiness, but to the master, this emptiness is not a void. It is a dynamic and essential element of the creation itself. The empty space in a painting gives the brushstroke its power and meaning. The silence between the actor's lines gives the words their resonance. Ma teaches that the form is born from the formless, that the presence of something is defined by the presence of nothing around it. The void itself is a potent creative force. Therefore, the renunciation we feared would lead to a sterile life instead opens the door to the deepest wellsprings of creativity. By letting go of the ego's frantic need to produce and control, we create a fertile emptiness, a silent womb of pure potential. We stop trying to shout our own ideas at the world and instead learn to listen for the subtle whispers of a deeper intelligence. Our work, whether it be in art, in science, in business, or simply in the art of living a life, ceases to be a product of strained effort and becomes an expression of graceful discovery. And this creative principle does not end with a finished painting or a song. It extends to the very way we act and move in the world. When our actions begin to arise from this same place of quiet, receptive, and non-striving awareness, they take on a new quality, a quality of profound effectiveness, grace, and an almost magical effortlessness. The silent, fertile emptiness we have cultivated does not remain a purely internal phenomenon. It does not stay confined to the realm of thought and insight. Its influence naturally begins to seep outward, transforming not just how we think, but how we act. The same receptive stillness that gives birth to a creative idea can choreograph our every movement in the world, leading to a state of profound grace and effectiveness. This is the wisdom of Wu Wei, a central concept in Taoist thought that harmonizes perfectly with the silent path, often translated as non-doing or non-action. This term can be deeply misleading. Wu Wei is not passivity, apathy, or laziness. It is the furthest thing from it. It is the supreme art of effortless action, of acting in perfect, spontaneous alignment with the natural flow of things, achieving maximum effect with minimum struggle. It is the external expression of a silent mind. To understand Wu Wei, we must first recognize its opposite, the mode in which most of us operate almost constantly, the mode of forcing. Forcing is the action of the ego. It is born of a belief that the world is a hostile or inert object that must be bent to our will through brute strength and relentless effort. It is the swimmer fighting against a powerful current, exhausting their energy for every inch of progress. It is the carpenter trying to hammer a screw, creating splintered wood and a bent fastener. It is the musician practicing with tense shoulders and a clenched jaw, trying to wrestle a beautiful melody from their instrument. This mode of action is characterized by struggle, by friction, by a sense of grinding resistance. It is noisy, both externally and internally. It is accompanied by the strained groans of effort, the tight grip of anxiety, and the frustrated monologue of the inner critic, demanding better results. We live this way because we believe our will, our conscious, striving effort, is the most powerful tool we have. We believe that if we just try harder, push more, and control more, we will achieve the outcome we desire. But this path, while occasionally successful, is always costly. It drains our life force, creates collateral damage, and leaves us in a perpetual state of tension. Wu Wei is the wisdom of acting like water. Water is the most yielding of all elements, yet it can overcome the hardest stone, not through direct confrontation, but through patient, persistent flow. It does not attack the rock, it simply moves around it, finding the path of least resistance, gently wearing it down over time. To act with Wu Wei is to first become silent and receptive enough to sense the natural currents in any given situation. It is to let go of our rigid, preconceived plans and instead attune ourselves to the unfolding reality of the moment. It is the surfer who does not try to command the ocean, but who feels the subtle shifts in the wave and adjusts their balance in perfect, fluid harmony, becoming one with its immense power. The surfer's action is intensely skillful and focused, yet it feels effortless, joyful, and free from struggle. This is Wu Wei. This state of effortless action is not an esoteric, mystical concept. It has a modern name: flow. Athletes call it being in the zone. Musicians call it being in the groove. It is that magical state where our sense of a separate, striving self dissolves. The tennis player is no longer thinking, "I must hit the ball." There is only the hitting. The jazz pianist is no longer thinking, "I will play this next chord." There is only the playing. Action becomes spontaneous, intuitive, and perfectly suited to the moment. Time seems to distort. The inner critic falls silent. There is only a joyful, fluid, and highly effective engagement with the present moment. This state is the very embodiment of Wu Wei, and critically, it is a state that can only be entered when the noisy, self-conscious, controlling ego gets out of the way. The silence we have been practicing is the very training ground for this state of being. The most masterful description of Wu Wei in action comes from the ancient Taoist text, the Zhuangzi, in the story of Cook Ding. The cook was carving an ox for his lord, Prince Wenwei. The prince watched in amazement. Every touch of the cook's hand, every lean of his shoulder, every plant of his foot, every bend of his knee was part of a silent ballet. The whispered hiss of his blade moving through the carcass was like a perfect piece of music. "Ah, this is marvelous," the prince exclaimed. "That skill should have reached such heights." Cook Ding laid down his knife and replied, "What I care about is the Tao, which goes beyond mere skill. When I first began cutting up oxen, all I could see was the ox itself. After 3 years, I no longer saw the whole ox, and now I meet it with my spirit and don't look with my eyes. My senses know where to stop but my spirit moves where it wants. I follow the natural contours, striking in the big hollows, guiding the knife through the big openings, and following things as they are. I never touch the smallest ligament or tendon, much less a main joint. He explained that a good cook changes his knife once a year because he cuts, and a mediocre cook changes his knife once a month because he hacks. But I, he said, have had this knife for 19 years, and it is as sharp as if it just came from the whetstone. There are spaces between the joints, and the blade of the knife has no thickness. If you insert what has no thickness into such a space, then there's plenty of room. That's why after 19 years, the blade of my knife is still as good as new. Cook Ding was not acting with force. He was acting from a place of profound, silent perception. He was not imposing his will upon the ox. He was sensing the empty spaces, the natural pathways, the inherent Tao of its structure, and moving through it without resistance. His was the action of water, not of the hammer. This is Wu Wei applied to a craft, but its application is universal. It is the wisdom of the diplomat who senses the unspoken needs in a tense negotiation and finds the one path that leads to harmony. It is the wisdom of the parent who, instead of forcing a fearful child, silently sits with them until they feel safe enough to move forward on their own. It is the wisdom of the programmer who, stuck on a problem, goes for a quiet walk and allows the solution to arise from the silent, associative mind, rather than continuing to stare at the screen. To act with Wu Wei is to trust the intelligence of the silence. It is to understand that the best course of action is often revealed, not decided upon. It requires the patience to wait for the opportune moment, the quiet perception to see the path of least resistance, and the courage to act in a way that is fluid and responsive, rather than rigid and controlling. This way of moving through the world is not only more effective, it is profoundly peaceful. By ceasing our constant struggle against the flow of life, the friction disappears. The inner noise of striving and anxiety subsides. We begin to feel a deep sense of alignment, of being supported by the universe rather than being at war with it. This peaceful, non-resistant engagement with life, free from the desperate need for specific outcomes, cultivates a powerful and unshakable form of inner peace. This is the state of upekkha, or equanimity. To move through the world with the effortless grace of Wu Wei, acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, is to experience a profound and sustainable peace. It is a peace born not of control, but of alignment. This peace, however, is not a fair weather friend. It must be tested. Life, in its infinite complexity, will inevitably present us with challenges that cannot be navigated with skillful action alone. We will face loss, criticism, sickness, and situations utterly beyond our influence. It is here that we must cultivate the crowning virtue of the wise heart, the final of the four immeasurables, upekkha, or equanimity. This is the mind's ability to remain spacious, balanced, and serene amidst the turbulent storms of life. It is the fruit of all our silent practice, the unshakable peace that comes from seeing things with perfect clarity. And it is the ultimate expression of inner freedom. Before we can understand what equanimity is, we must be clear about what it is not. In our modern language, the closest word might be equanimity, but it is often confused with indifference, detachment, or a kind of cold, stoic apathy. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. Indifference is a closing of the heart. It is a defense mechanism, a refusal to feel, a retreat from the world into a protected fortress of numbness. It is born of fear, upekkha. On the other hand, is a radical opening of the heart. It is born of courage and wisdom. It is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of a vast, boundless awareness that is capable of holding all feelings, all experiences, without being capsized by them. Imagine the sky. The sky does not fight the storm clouds or the bolts of lightning. It does not cling to the beautiful sunset. It allows all weather, the violent, the gentle, the brilliant, the dreary to arise, pass through it, and dissolve, without being stained or fundamentally changed by the experience. The sky's nature is spacious peace. Indifference is a tiny, locked bunker, hiding from the weather. Equanimity is the boundless sky itself. This unshakable peace is cultivated and tested by what the Buddhist teachings call the 8 worldly winds. These are the 4 pairs of opposites that blow through every human life, constantly threatening to throw us off balance. They are pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and disrepute. Our ordinary, untrained mind is like a weather vane, spinning frantically with every shift in these winds. When the winds of pleasure, gain, praise, and fame are blowing, we are happy, elated, and feel that life is good. But because all things are impermanent, these winds will inevitably change. They will be replaced by the winds of pain, loss, blame, and disrepute. When this happens, we are thrown into despair, anxiety, and feel that life is terrible. Our inner peace is entirely conditional, utterly dependent on external circumstances. To live this way is to be a puppet, with our strings pulled by the opinions of others, by the fluctuations of the market, by the health of our body, and by the whims of fortune. Upekkha is the art of cutting these strings. Our silent meditation practice is the direct training ground for developing this art. It is in the quiet of our own inner laboratory that we work with these 8 winds on a miniature scale, building the muscle of a balanced mind. As we sit, a feeling of deep peace may arise. This is pleasure. The untrained mind clings to it, and when it fades, feels disappointed. The training is to observe the pleasure with appreciation but without grasping, knowing its impermanent nature. Then, a sharp pain may develop in the knee. This is pain. The untrained mind resists it, creating tension and frustration. The training is to observe the sensation of pain with a calm, accepting curiosity. Without the secondary layer of mental resistance, a thought may arise: I am doing this well. I am a good meditator. This is inner praise. The training is to note it and let it go without inflating the ego. A moment later, a storm of distraction arises. I can't do this. My mind is a mess. This is inner blame. The training is to note these thoughts with kindness, without believing their story. By repeatedly practicing non-reactivity to these small, internal gusts of wind, we are preparing ourselves for the great gales of the outer world. We are stabilizing the ship in the calm harbor so that it is ready for the open sea. The classic image for upekkha is that of a great, ancient mountain. Picture it standing in the center of a vast plain. It has witnessed millennia. The fierce winds of a hurricane howl against its slopes, but the mountain does not tremble. It simply allows the wind to blow. The lashing rains of a monsoon cascade down its face, but the mountain is not distressed. It simply allows the water to flow. Bolts of lightning, brighter than 1,000 suns, crash against its peak. But the mountain is not frightened. The scorching sun of summer beats down, and the deep snow of winter blankets, but the mountain's core remains unchanged. It does not complain about the bad weather or long for the good weather. It is so deeply rooted in the earth, so completely and silently itself, that the passing drama of the sky is of no consequence to its fundamental being. It is a perfect embodiment of stability, patience, and silent, unshakable peace. The wise person, through their practice, cultivates this mountain-like quality of mind. Their peace is not a fragile thing, dependent on sunny days. It is a deep, abiding strength, rooted in the bedrock of wisdom, capable of weathering any storm. This equanimity is the sublime culmination of our journey so far. It is a peace made possible by the clear seeing of anicca, which understands that all states are temporary, and the deep insight into anatta, which understands there is no solid self to be harmed or protected. It is a peace that is warmed and informed by karuna, a deep compassion for all beings who are still being tossed about by the winds. It is the ultimate freedom, not the freedom to control the world, but the freedom from being controlled by the world. It is the discovery of a sanctuary of peace within us that no external event can ever touch. As this state of equanimity becomes more and more our natural default, a subtle and profound shift occurs in our relationship with silence itself. Up to this point, we have approached silence as a practice, a tool, a technique, a refuge we seek out. It has been something we do in order to cultivate these wholesome qualities. But when the mind becomes as spacious and still as the mountain, this distinction between the practitioner and the practice begins to dissolve. Silence is no longer a place we visit. It becomes our home. It is no longer a discipline we impose, but the very nature of our being. We cease to be a person who is practicing silence, and we begin to become as silent as nature itself. The cultivation of equanimity, that mountain-like stability of heart, marks a profound turning point in our inner journey. It signals a graduation from a state of active practice to one of natural being. Up until now, we have approached silence as a tool, a technique, a sanctuary we seek out in order to calm our minds and train our hearts. We have been the diligent practitioner, working to achieve a state of peace, but as equanimity takes deeper root, this relationship between the doer and the doing begins to dissolve. Silence is no longer a discipline we impose. It becomes the very nature of our awareness. It is no longer a place we visit for refuge. it becomes the home in which we live. The path is no longer a means to an end. We come to realize that the path itself, this quiet, observant returning, is the destination. This is the homecoming, the return to the source, the reharmonization of our own being with the great, eloquent silence of nature itself. We have been conditioned to believe that communication requires words, that wisdom is found in books, and that truth is a concept to be articulated. But if we quiet our own inner noise long enough, we begin to perceive a different kind of teaching, a wisdom that is broadcast constantly from the world around us. Consider the ancient forest. Walk among trees that have stood for centuries. There is a silence here, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence teeming with life, with presence. A great oak does not need to speak of its strength. Its gnarled roots and thick trunk are a silent testament to its endurance. It does not need to justify its existence. It simply is, reaching for the light, providing shade, and housing countless other beings in its quiet embrace. The forest teaches a wordless sermon on patience, on the rootedness, and on the wisdom of standing still. Or consider the ocean. On its surface, it may be a chaos of crashing waves and noise, much like our own agitated mind. But in its depths lies a profound, crushing silence, a stillness that holds the immense power of the entire body of water. The ocean does not need to announce its power or its vastness. It simply expresses it through its eternal, rhythmic breathing against the shore. It teaches us of cycles, of hidden depths, and of a power that is found not in frantic activity, but in immense, contained presence. Gaze up at the night sky. Far from the glare of the city, you are met with a silence so absolute and so vast it can feel overwhelming. The stars and galaxies do not shout for our attention. They do not need to prove their importance. They simply shine, holding their place in a cosmic dance of unimaginable scale and precision. The silence of the cosmos teaches us of perspective, of order, and of the transparent, almost comical smallness of our own ego's dramas. Nature, in its infinite majesty, does not use language. Its very existence is its message. In this context, the incessant noise of the human world, both internal and external, begins to appear as a strange anomaly. We are the one species that seems to have forgotten that we are a part of nature, not separate from it. We have cocooned ourselves in a world of concepts, stories, and digital chatter. We live inside our thoughts about the world, rather than living in the world itself. This layer of conceptual noise acts as a buffer, insulating us from the direct, unmediated experience of reality. Our frantic activity, our constant need for distraction, our unending inner monologue, all of this is a sign of a deep imbalance, a spiritual homesickness. We are like a child who has run away from a beautiful, peaceful home and now wanders, lost and agitated, in a noisy and confusing city, having forgotten the way back, the entire spiritual path, then can be understood not as a process of building something new, but as a process of returning. It is a journey of deconstruction, of patiently dismantling the artificial structures of the ego so that our own true nature can be revealed. The silence we cultivate is not an artificial state we are creating. It is the rediscovery of the natural silence that has been our birthright all along. A silence that was simply buried beneath the accumulated noise of a lifetime. The peace of a quiet mind is not a foreign state. It is our original state. Wisdom is not something we acquire. It is the natural intelligence that shines forth when the clouds of confusion are allowed to disperse. The purpose of our practice is simply to get out of our own way, to stop generating the static that interferes with the clear signal of our own innate awareness. When this return is complete, the silence of a sage is of a different quality than the silence of a novice. The novice's silence is a discipline, an act of will. It can feel effortful, like holding one's breath. But the sage's silence is as natural and unself-conscious as the fragrance of a jasmine flower. The flower does not try to be fragrant. It does not engage in a fragrance practice. It simply lives out its nature, and its fragrance is the effortless byproduct of its being. In the same way, the sage does not try to be silent or peaceful. They have simply returned to their own true nature, and their silence is a natural radiation of their inner state. There is no longer a sense of a practitioner separate from the practice. The dancer has merged completely with the dance. The path has become the destination. This is the great homecoming. It is the end of the war with ourselves and with the world. It is a realization that the peace we were seeking was never out there to be found, but was always in here, waiting to be uncovered. It is a deep, embodied understanding that we are not separate from the silent wisdom of the cosmos, but are a unique expression of it. We learn that our true nature is as silent as the deep ocean, as rooted as the ancient tree, and as spacious as the night sky. When we have truly come home to ourselves in this way, we find we have the inner resources and the fearless stability to face even the most profound and intimidating of life's mysteries, having become one with the timeless, cyclical pulse of nature. How then do we approach the great silence that awaits us all? The ultimate reality of our own mortality. Having returned to the silent, harmonious ground of our own true nature, we find ourselves rooted in a peace that feels timeless. We have become like the mountain, abiding in a deep, equanimous stillness. Yet, we are not mountains. We inhabit bodies that are bound by time, subject to sickness, aging, and an inevitable end. We must now turn the calm, clear light of our awareness toward the one great mystery that all beings must face. The truth that underlies so much of our hidden anxiety and frantic activity. We must learn to face the reality of our own mortality. Our entire civilization, with its relentless pursuit of progress, its worship of youth, and its desperate creation of legacies, can be seen as an elaborate and noisy defense against the simple, silent fact of death. We use the clamor of our ambitions and the anesthetic of our distractions to avoid contemplating our own final letting go. But the path of silence invites us to do the unthinkable, to turn and face this great mystery directly, not with terror, but with a clear-eyed and peaceful curiosity. The noise of our lives is a powerful sedative against existential dread. We fill our days from dawn until dusk with work, with plans, with entertainment. with the endless scroll of information and the constant chatter of social connection, we tell ourselves we are being productive, that we are living life to the fullest. But if we are honest, we can often feel a frantic, driven quality to our busyness. We are not just running towards success, we are running away from silence. We are afraid of the quiet moments, the spaces between tasks, because it is in these spaces that the deeper questions can arise. The thought of our own finitude, of the ultimate meaning of our fleeting existence, can surface, and because we have not been trained to meet this thought with wisdom, it feels like a threat. And so, we reach for our phone, turn on the television, start another project, anything to drown out the whisper of our own impermanence. We have become a culture that uses noise to forget that we will one day return to an infinite silence. The silent path offers a radically different approach. Instead of fleeing from the thought of death, we learn to gently and intentionally turn toward it. In the Buddhist tradition, this is a formal practice known as maranasati, or mindfulness of death. This is not a morbid or pessimistic obsession. It is a powerful, life-affirming contemplation designed to strip death of its terrifying power by bathing it in the light of calm. Repeated attention. In the quiet of meditation, one brings the reality of death to mind, not as a frightening story, but as a simple truth. One reflects, my body is of a nature to age, to get sick, and to die. This is the way of all living things. The moment of my death is uncertain, but its coming is absolutely certain. By calmly facing this fact again and again, the mind becomes familiar with it. The emotional charge, the terror of the unknown, begins to fade. The idea of death is domesticated. It is transformed from a monster lurking in the shadows into a natural and accepted part of life's landscape. This practice is a powerful antidote to delusion, cutting through our unconscious belief that we have an infinite amount of time. In a deeper sense, our entire journey into silence has been a preparation for this final letting go. With every step on this path, we have been practicing the art of dying. When we sit in silence and let go of the urge to speak, we are allowing a small impulse to die without being born into action. When we watch a powerful emotion arise and we allow it to pass away without clinging to it, we are experiencing the death of a feeling. When we see a thought as a fleeting, impersonal event and let it dissolve, we are witnessing the death of a moment of mind. Each time we practice in this way, we are becoming more skilled at the art of release. The deepest rehearsal, however, has been our investigation into anatta. In seeing through the illusion of the solid, separate self, we have already experienced the death of the ego. The protagonist of our life story, we have seen that the entity we were so desperately trying to protect and preserve was never really there in the first place. The person who has, in their meditation, died 1,000 small deaths is no longer terrified of the one great death that is to come. They understand it not as an annihilation, but as a final, complete return to the boundless nature they have already discovered within. The story of Kisa Gautami is perhaps the most poignant teaching on this profound transformation. She was a young woman whose identity and happiness were entirely wrapped up in her infant son. When the child suddenly died, her world collapsed, consumed by a grief so powerful it tipped into madness. She refused to accept his death. She clutched the small, lifeless body to her chest and wandered through her village, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could restore him. The villagers, seeing her pitiable state, treated her with compassion and, knowing they could not help her, wisely directed her to the Buddha. She burst before him, laid her child at his feet, and desperately pleaded for his help. The Buddha looked at her with immense kindness and did not offer a lecture on impermanence. He met her where she was. He said, "There is only one medicine that can help. You must go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one, not a parent, not a child, not a servant has ever died." Filled with a surge of desperate hope, Kisa Gotami rushed back into the village. At the first house, she asked for the mustard seed, and the family readily offered it. But when she asked her crucial question, they replied with sadness, "Alas, we have the seed, but last year the patriarch of our family passed away." She went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every family had a seed to offer, but every family had also known the sorrow of loss. As she went from door to door, her frantic, personal grief began to undergo a profound, silent transformation. Her I, her me, her my suffering began to dissolve as she bore witness to the universal suffering of all beings. As evening fell, she sat by the side of the road, watching the lamps being lit in the village. She watched as they flickered, and one by one, were extinguished. In that moment, watching the lights die, she had a direct insight into the truth she had heard all day. How selfish I have been in my grief. She thought, this is not my unique tragedy. It is the law of all things. Her heart, now vast and filled with a sober, compassionate understanding, was finally ready to let go. She returned to the Buddha, not as a desperate mother, but as an awakened woman, and laid her child to rest. By befriending silence, we learn to befriend the great silence. The fear of death, we discover, is ultimately the ego's fear of its own dissolution. The silent path is a gentle, systematic training in this very dissolution, and in this we find the ultimate paradox. A clear and constant contemplation of death does not make one morbid or fearful. It is the secret to living a life of vibrant, courageous authenticity. When we are no longer afraid of our final moment, we are finally free to live fully, gratefully, and joyfully in this one. This profound acceptance of our own end changes the entire orientation of our existence. With our own existential anxieties pacified, a new question arises. What shall we do with the precious, unfeared time we have left? The heart, now spacious and free, naturally turns outward, possessed by a desire to help other beings who are still lost in the terrifying dream of separateness. Our life ceases to be a project of self-preservation and becomes an offering of selfless service. Having stood in the quiet presence of our own mortality and found not terror but a liberating acceptance, a profound question naturally arises. if we are no longer driven by the frantic need to preserve our own ego or build a legacy that will outlast our fleeting existence? What then becomes the purpose of our life? What do we do with the precious, unfeared days we have left? The path of wisdom reveals that the journey does not end with personal liberation. To be free from one's own suffering, while remaining indifferent to the suffering of others, is seen as an incomplete peace. The heart that has been rendered spacious and soft by the insights of silence naturally overflows with a boundless empathy for all beings who are still lost in the painful dream of separation and fear. It is here that the spiritual journey turns outward, blossoming from a personal quest for peace into a life of selfless service. This is the noble path of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is the archetypal hero of the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. This is a being who, through profound wisdom and diligent practice, has attained the insights necessary to enter the final peace of nirvana, to be utterly free from the cycle of suffering. They stand at the very gates of paradise, yet they make a conscious, loving choice. They turn back, out of an immense and unconditional compassion for all beings, still caught in the fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance. They vow to remain in the world, to be reborn again and again, until every last being has been guided to liberation. This is not a choice born of grim duty, but of a joyful, resonant love. The Bodhisattva has so thoroughly seen through the illusion of the separate self that they no longer perceive a meaningful distinction between self and other. The suffering of another is their suffering. The liberation of another is their liberation. Their vow is the ultimate expression of interconnectedness, the perfect marriage of prajna, or transcendent wisdom, and karuna, or great compassion. How does such a being teach? How do they act in the world? While a bodhisattva may at times use words, their most profound teaching is silent. It is the teaching of their very presence. Their life itself becomes the sermon for those caught in the grip of anxiety. The bodhisattva's unshakable equanimity is a silent testament that peace is possible. For those consumed by anger and conflict, the bodhisattva's gentle, non-reactive nature is a silent demonstration of the power of non-violence. For those lost in loneliness and despair, the bodhisattva's willingness to listen with deep, silent attention is a healing balm that communicates more value and acceptance than any spoken praise. They teach by embodying the fruits of the path. They are a living example, a walking sanctuary, a proof of concept that a human being can live a life free from the tyranny of the ego. This silent teaching bypasses the argumentative, intellectual mind and speaks directly to the heart, planting a seed of possibility in all who encounter it. When a bodhisattva does act, their action flows from the same deep well of silence. Because they have no ego to gratify, their actions are utterly pure. They are not helping others in order to be seen as a good person, to receive thanks, or to accumulate merit. There is no subtle desire for reward. This allows them to act with true humility and, very often, in complete anonymity. The kindest and most transformative acts in the world are often those for which no one takes credit. This ego-less state also allows them to employ upaya, or skillful means. Having quieted their own inner noise, they can perceive with perfect clarity the true needs of a situation and of the person before them. They are not bound by a rigid, one-size-fits-all morality. Their silence allows them to listen so deeply that their response is perfectly tailored to the moment. For one person, the most compassionate action might be a gentle word. For another, it might be a challenging silence. For another, it might be a simple, physical act of service. Their actions are not premeditated. They are a spontaneous, creative, and perfectly appropriate response that arises from the stillness of a wise and loving heart. This ideal is personified in the great archetypal figure of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. The very name means the one who hears the cries of the world. This is not a physical hearing, but a silent, cosmic resonance with the vibrations of suffering everywhere. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms, and in the palm of each hand is an open eye. The 1,000 arms represent the infinite capacity to act, to reach out and help in any situation. The eyes in the hands signify that this action is not blind. It is united with the wisdom of clear seeing. Each hand holds a different tool, a rope, a flower, a vessel of healing nectar, symbolizing the endless variety of skillful means that can be deployed, each one perfectly suited to a specific form of suffering. Avalokiteshvara is not a deity to be worshipped from afar, but an ideal of our own potential, a blueprint for the enlightened heart. This archetype works tirelessly and silently, responding to need without a trace of self-interest. We may feel that this ideal is impossibly lofty, reserved for enlightened saints. But the Bodhisattva path does not begin with a grand vow. It begins with a single, small, compassionate act. We can all be bodhisattvas in training, and our practice ground is the fabric of our daily lives. Every time we choose a silent act of kindness over a self-serving one, we are walking this path. When we offer our full, silent attention to a partner or a child, allowing them to feel truly heard, we are acting as a bodhisattva. When we choose to let another car merge into our lane in traffic, letting go of our own urgency for a moment, we are practicing this path. When we quietly pick up a piece of trash on the sidewalk rather than ignoring it, when we resist the urge to share a juicy piece of gossip, when we sit in silent solidarity with a friend who is grieving in these simple, uncelebrated moments, the bodhisattva spirit comes alive in us. These are the silent, anonymous acts of kindness that begin to rewire our hearts from a state of self-concern to one of universal care. Thus, the journey into silence, which may have begun as a personal quest for inner peace, finds its ultimate and most beautiful fulfillment in a life of compassionate service. The freedom we discover is not a retreat from the world, but the very thing that allows us to engage with the world's suffering skillfully and fearlessly. Our silence becomes the source from which our most potent, healing, and meaningful actions arise. We have traveled far on this inner path, from the noise of the world to the silence of the mind, from the prison of the ego to the freedom of not self, from the fear of death to the boundless heart of the bodhisattva. As we stand here now, looking back on this transformative journey, we are ready to grasp the final, simplest, and most profound realization of all, that the peace we have been seeking was never at the end of the road. we have journeyed together through the vast and varied landscape of silence. We began as refugees, fleeing the oppressive tyranny of a noisy world. We learned to quiet the clamor and, in that quiet, discovered the tools to observe our minds, regulate our emotions, and let go of our attachments. We witnessed the profound truths of impermanence and not self, and we saw how this inner work blossoms into a life of effortless action and boundless compassion. We have followed the path from the agitated self to the silent bodhisattva. Now, as we stand at the culmination of this journey, we are ready to receive its ultimate teaching, a truth so simple and so profound that it turns the entire journey on its head. We began this path seeking peace as a destination, a far-off prize to be won after years of diligent practice. The final realization is this: peace was never the destination. Peace was the way all along, the great spiritual trap, the subtle illusion that can ensnare even the most sincere seeker, is the belief that peace is a future event. We tell ourselves, I will be peaceful when my life is finally in order. I will find peace when I master this meditation technique. Or I will have peace when my mind is finally quiet. This when-then model of thinking is the ego's last and most clever defense. It takes the spiritual path and turns it into just another form of striving, another project of self-improvement, another goal to be achieved. It places peace perpetually in the future, ensuring that we never, ever arrive. It keeps us in the familiar, exhausting state of becoming, rather than allowing us to rest in the simple grace of being. We treat peace as a reward for our efforts, rather than recognizing it as the very nature of our awareness when effort ceases. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh distilled this profound insight into a single, luminous phrase: there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. This is not a clever turn of phrase. It is a direct instruction. It invites us to re-examine every step of the path we have taken and to see that the goal was present in every single step. When, in a moment of agitation, you made the conscious choice to return your awareness to the simple, silent rhythm of your breath, that was not a step toward peace. That moment of mindful return was peace itself. When, in a heated conversation, you chose the sacred pause over a reactive word, that was not a technique to find peace. That spacious moment of non-reaction was peace. When you observed a painful feeling without judgment, when you let go of the need to be right, when you offered your silent, compassionate presence to another, each of these acts was not a means to an end. Each was an end in itself, a living, breathing embodiment of peace in action. The path is not made of arduous, non-peaceful steps that lead to a peaceful destination. The path is made of peaceful steps. There is a powerful story of a king who announced a contest to find the artist who could paint the most perfect picture of peace. Many artists tried. They painted scenes of serene, crystal clear lakes nestled in silent mountains, tranquil meadows bathed in the soft light of dusk, and quiet streams flowing gently through idyllic forests. The king looked at them all. They were beautiful, but none of them, he felt, captured the true essence of peace. These were pictures of quiet, but not necessarily of peace. Then, He came to the final painting. It was a shocking scene. It depicted a huge, roaring waterfall, a tumultuous cascade of violent, crashing water, thundering down a rugged mountainside under a dark, stormy sky. It seemed to be the very antithesis of peace. But the king, a wise man, looked closer, and there, tucked into a tiny crevice in the rock face, directly behind the thundering curtain of water, he saw it. A small mother bird was sitting calmly on her nest, sheltered and perfectly at ease, tending to her young. That, the king declared, was the winning painting. This is the peace we have been cultivating. It is not the fragile peace of the calm lake, which is shattered by the first stone that is tossed into it. It is the resilient, unshakable peace of the mother bird. It is the discovery of a silent, untouchable sanctuary right in the heart of life's chaos. It is the ability to remain centered, calm, and loving, even when the waterfalls of loss, conflict, and difficulty are roaring all around us. True peace, upekkha, is not an escape from life, but the courage and wisdom to engage with all of life, its beauty and its terror. From a place of inner stillness, the silence we have cultivated is not a wall to keep the world out. It is the quiet nest of the heart that allows us to live safely and sanely within it. From this place of inner peace, our engagement with the world is utterly transformed. We no longer look to the world to give us peace, and so we are no longer angered or disappointed by its inherent chaos. Instead, because we are overflowing with the peace of our own silent nature, we are able to bring peace to the world. An anxious person adds anxiety to an already anxious situation. A calm person brings the gift of their own stability. Our silent, centered presence becomes our greatest offering. It is the source of our skillful action, our deep listening, our non-judgment, and our boundless compassion. We cease to be frantic seekers of peace and become quiet carriers of it. And so, our long journey into silence comes full circle. We see that the strength of the wise is not some esoteric knowledge they possess, but their simple, radical realization that peace is their natural state, and that the entire path consists of nothing more than remembering this truth. Moment by moment, the journey is the continuous, gentle act of letting go of all that is not peace, of shedding all the layers of noise and fear and ego, until what remains is the silent, luminous, and compassionate awareness that was there from the very beginning. We were never seeking a destination. We were simply learning to walk the path, and the path is silence. We have traveled a great distance together, on a journey that took us not across lands, but through the inner landscapes of the mind and heart. We began in the dissonant noise of the modern world, feeling its anxious and fragmenting effects. We then stepped through the gateway of silence, discovering that it was not an emptiness to be feared, but a fertile space of profound potential. In that stillness, we learned to observe our thoughts with clarity, to hold our emotions with compassion, and to see with our own eyes the great, liberating truths of impermanence and the transparent nature of the self. We saw how this wisdom naturally blossoms into a life of effortless action and boundless compassion. a life dedicated not to serving the ego, but to serving the world. We have arrived, at last, at the simple, radical, and beautiful understanding that the peace we were seeking was never at the end of some long and arduous path. It was present in every quiet breath, in every moment of letting go, in every conscious step we took along the way. The ultimate message of this journey is this: the strength of the wise is not found in the volume of their voice, the force of their arguments, or the certainty of their opinions. It is found in the vast, silent, and unshakable depth from which their words and actions arise. It is the strength of the mountain that can withstand any storm, the strength of the deep ocean that remains calm beneath the turbulent surface. And this peace, this strength, is not a gift bestowed upon a chosen few. It is the birthright of every human heart. It is not a destination you must struggle to reach, but an inner sanctuary you can choose to inhabit. Right now, in this very moment, peace is not the absence of the waterfall's roar. It is the quiet nest you build in the heart of it. You do not need to retreat to a monastery or dramatically change your life to begin this journey home. The path begins with a single, simple, and quiet choice. When this message ends, perhaps you can choose to remain in silence for just 5 more minutes. Put down your phone, turn away from the screen, and simply be. Notice the rhythm of your own breath. Listen to the sounds around you without labeling them. Feel the simple, miraculous sensation of being alive. In that small, intentional act of stillness, you are planting the seed of the great banyan tree. In that moment, you are the wise person. In that moment, you are the silent bodhisattva. And in that moment, you are already and completely at peace. The great work is not ahead of you. It is available now. Begin.